Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto sacrificed himself to save his mother and newborn baby sister. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Screams, blood, slaughter, death. Everywhere you looked you could see bodies of badly burned shinobi and kunoichi alike. Their bodies were not even able to be identified. For what surrounded them were buildings that were crumbling from what looked like to be crushed or burnt by the massive flames surrounding the area. What was happening? Well, it was simple. The once great place known as Konohagakure, strongest shinobi village of the 5 great shinobi villages, was being attacked by a massive-looking fox with 9 gigantic flaming tails. The fox was in legend named the Kyubi no Kitsune. Some say it never appears in human affairs aside the fight between Hiroshima Senju and Madara Uchiha, since it was summoned by the Uchiha clan founder. But the question was why? Why had the fox attacked this once great shinobi village? That was on the mind of a few people. While there were more important things going on, in which case was a fight happening on the front line. 4 figures could be seen. First was a man that stood the height of 5 feet 8 inches. He wore the normal shinobi attire, which consisted of a dark blue long-sleeved shirt with a green jounin flak jacket. He also wore dark blue jounin pants that had medical tapped at the ends. Ending his attire was blue shinobi sandals and a sleeveless white trench coat with red flames licking the bottoms and a small chain connecting the ends together. The man had tan skin with icy sharp blue eyes with spiky yellow hair. This man's name was Minato Namake's 4th Hokage of Konohagakure, husband to Kushina Uzumaki and father to his 5-year-old son Naruto Uzumaki Namake's and his newborn daughter Mito Uzumaki Namake's, named after Kushina's great-grandmother. At the moment he was fighting a man standing the same height. Not much could be said about this man except for a few things. First was that all that could be seen was that he wore black shinobi sandals and black shinobi pants. Beyond this was just a black cloak that covered everything on the upper body. He also adorned a mask with a design on the left side. But what was unusual was that there was only one eye hole in it, which was on the man's right side of his face. These two were fighting while the other two were watching with mixed emotions. The first was a beautiful woman with long silky red hair that at the moment reached the ground. She had a heart-shaped face and violet eyes that showed how tired she looked. She was at the moment wearing a hospital gown and was holding a covered-up bundle in her arms. The only thing you could see was a tuft of red hair. This woman was Kushina Uzumaki, second Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Kitsune, wife of Minato Namake's and mother of Naruto and Mito Uzumaki Namake's. She was holding her newborn daughter tightly at her chest as she watched her husband fight off the man that ruined everything for them, the one who destroyed the day her daughter was coming into this world. She looked worryingly at the person beside her. This person she was looking at now was a boy that looked around the age of 5 years old. He was wearing an attire not seen on any other kid their age. He was wearing an attire of a shinobi. His clothes were special made since this boy had become a shinobi at a young age. But it all was what a normal umbu would wear, only not with a mask. His face was what had her concerned. This boy had blue eyes that were round like hers, but were already starting to narrow like Minato's, and had spiky yellow hair like Minato, but it was much more spiky than Minato's even when he was younger. This boy was none other than her and Minato's pride and joy and genius of a shinobi. He was Naruto Uzumaki Namake's genin of Konohagakure, son of Minato Namake's and Kushina Uzumaki, and now brother of Mito Uzumaki Namake's. He had a kunai and shuriken pouch on his left thigh. Right now Kushina was getting worried for her son, who was glaring at the cloaked figure with much hate that surprised her, since she hadn't seen such hate from her son at all except when it came to some of the higher up people in Konoha. Although I don't blame him. Fucking council been trying to turn him into a weapon since he was born. Kami only knows what they would do when they find out Mito was born. She thought bitterly before she looked back at the fight and saw Minato Rasengan the cloaked figure into the ground using his Hiraishin no Jutsu level 2. That was before Minato jumped back to them as the man disappeared a few feet from them holding his injured arm. The man himself was glaring at Minato's form with hate and rage. This spiky-haired fool stopped his plans fully, but still Kyubi could still destroy Konoha. So with that he just turned his head toward Kushina's form and saw the little bundle in her arms. He smiled evilly behind his mask and warped behind her, and before Minato could do anything the cloaked figure took out a kunai and brought it down to the bundle in Kushina's arms. Minato watched in horrified eyes as he used Hiraishin to get there in time while Kushina was too weak after having Kyubi ripped out of her by this man. But with surprising speed the kunai was stopped by another which shocked the masked man before he looked into another pair of blue eyes. But they held so much more coldness and hate that it made the man inwardly slightly flinch. Naruto kept his gaze on the man, not seeing the shocked look of his parents, before jumping up, kicking the man in the face, send the man skidding back a few feet. This gave Minato the time to appear between his family and the cloaked figure, who now had a bit of a crack in his mask. The man now was shocked. He was actually kicked, or more so was hit. He was now glaring at the other blonde boy in hate and now wonder. He mentally shook his head before speaking. I don't need to be here anymore, my job here is done, he said before warping out of the area. With the man now gone, Minato stretched out his senses to look for the man, and sighed in relief not finding the man not there. He looked over his shoulder and smiled at his family before he heard Kushina start to cough violently. He rushed over to her as Naruto was by her side in an instant, and was doing as much as he could to help her. He was looking worried as his mother was coughing up blood while protectingly holding Mito in her arms. He gently held her upright as Minato rushed over and was checking her, and saw the effects of having Kyuubi ripped out of her taking its toll. He then remembered the threat that was looming over Konoha and looked at the now growling Kyuubi who had turned its sights on them. He glared as his mind was going a mile a minute to think of an idea to stop the Kyuubi before he remembered a type of sealing that he had created with the help of Kushina's own mastery in sealing. He grimly remembered the effects of what it does to the user, but remembered the pros of what it does. Naruto, who was holding his little sister in his arms and helping his mother to support her weakened state. He looked and saw the emotions running through his Tusan's eyes as he was staring at the Kyuubi who was coming at them. Kushina must have seen this before chakra chains came out of the ground holding the Kyuubi, slamming it down in front of them. This action made Minato and Naruto snap their heads to her in worry, seeing her get weaker as she looked into Kyuubi's crazed eyes and saw something wrong with it, but couldn't figure it out in her state of weakness. Minato sighed before he heard a rush of wind and saw a giant paw heading for Kushina and cursed before flashing in a flash of yellow. He hoped he would make it in time. Naruto saw the coming paw and knew where it was going. He looked at his little Amuto in his arms before kissing her forehead before putting her in Kushina's arms and jumping in the way with his back at the incoming paw. Kushina looked with horrified eyes as Naruto just threw himself in harm's way to stop the incoming attack from killing her. She saw Minato appear too late, and saw him watch with horrified eyes as his son just sacrificed himself for his mother. He started to tear up seeing what was happening, but that was squashed down when his son weakly looked at him as blood was dripping from his mouth. Naruto at the moment was in so much pain he couldn't think straight except for just protecting his mother. He looked over his shoulder and glared at the less crazed eyes of Kyuubi before looking at his father that was staring him at what had happened. He smiled at his father as more blood dripped from him. "Tusen, do it while you have the chance," he said as the light in his eyes was going out. Minato frowned before he saw Naruto's understanding his eyes. His eyes were growing wide as Kushina was crying on what was happening. She still listened on what Naruto was saying. "Sochi W, what are you?" he said. "Tusen, use the sealing on me, use the Shiki Fuan on me while you have the chance," he said in a much weaker voice. Kushina shot her head up in disbelief at what her son just said while Minato just looked into his son's eyes, seeing his son completely serious of what he was saying. Kushina voiced her concern. "Sochi, why?" she said, which Naruto looked at her before smiling, ignoring the blood running down his chin. "Why? It's simple, I wanted to protect you, Ka-san. As for the sealing, as Kof, I'm sure you know, I'm actually now connected to Kyuubi, so now the Shiki Fuan would do its work and Kof dragged this fox into me," he said. "But how do why you know that as sealing?" said Minato as his along with Kushina's eyes were watering. Naruto just smiled. "Because I've studied the effects from the vault while you weren't looking. I was curious, and knew this was the only sealing I knew would stop the Kyuubi, and I know for a fact that if the container was physically connected to the one being sealed, this would greatly increase the chances of the sealing be done perfectly," he said before going into a coughing fit. Minato and Kushina were now letting the tears fall. They knew of that sealing. It was the same one Kushina helped Minato with. They both knew of the effects and what it does. The sealing would summon the god of death itself, Shinigami, to carry on the sealing, and even though the Shinigami has immense power, it would have trouble sealing one like Kyuubi. That's when they realized Naruto's plan and had to smile even though their son was dying in front of them. While they couldn't do anything about it, Naruto showed smarts. They went beyond his age. Minato let a tear fall before looking at Kushina as she didn't hold anything back as she sobbed into Naruto's shoulder. He knew if he went through with the sealing he would most definitely die, and the way Kushina was, she would too. From the lack of Kyuubi, even with the Uzumaki's longevity, she wouldn't come out of this alive. And finally his son Naruto, his flesh and blood, he didn't know if he would survive, since the Shinigami would seal it up in the container and drag the container into its realm with himself included, or would heal Naruto. But either way, if they three died, who would look after Mito? He wasn't stupid to leave her in Konoha's hands, but he did trust Jiraiya if things got bad, and Tsunade was there too. He didn't believe in Sarutobi much. Even if he did call the man sensei, he just couldn't place that there was something underneath that old man that was dangerous. He sighed before he smiled at his son and wife before walking up to Kushina and bringing her into a hug. He looked down at Mito with eternal sadness in his eyes before looking at Naruto with so much respect for his son. "Kushi-chan, let's do it," he said, which she looked at him with a weak defiant look before a cough interrupted her thoughts. She looked and saw Naruto looking at with pleading eyes, which broke her iron will that she was known for before she nodded as well. Knowing this was the only way, Naruto smiled before he looked at his father. "Tusan, do it now," he said with a struggle as he coughed up more blood. Minato nodded quickly as he did the hand signs. As he did so, Naruto looked at Kushina one more time. "Kasa-and let me see her one more time," he said, gesturing to Mito. Kushina smiled sadly as she weakly shifted Mito in her arms to uncover a sleeping redhead baby girl. Naruto smiled at her, and even though he had lost all strength in his whole body, he moved his bloody right hand and gently touched her sleeping face. His eyes were looking at her face solely, even as his father was getting to the last signs, or the fact Sarutobi arrived with Kakashi and Jiraiya, or the fact his mother was watching with sad tears coming down her face. Emuro, I don't know if you can hear me, but I will say this: Oniai-san doesn't have long, and he wants to say his piece, he said as the baby girl's eyes started to twitch. As Naruto was doing this, he didn't see the once upon a time Kyuubi-crazed eyes glaring down on him go glazed before it blinked before looking upon the situation before its eyes shot wide open seeing Kushina's state. That's also when it felt something on its left claw. It looked down to see Naruto's bloody body struck through its claw. Its eyes shot wide open even more as an emotion flickered in its eyes. If anyone would have seen it, they would have seen a tear drop from the Kyuubi's eye. Naruto looked and saw Mito's eyes starting to slowly open. He was shocked while internally was happy to see her eyes before he died. He knew he would die. He wasn't stupid, and it made him sad he wouldn't be able to watch her grow. He cut out his musings to see violet innocent eyes staring at him curiously. He smiled sadly as he stroked her small cheek, which got a small giggle from the now awake little girl. He smirked. Even as he was on death's door, he would smile at his baby sister since she was taking her first look into the world, and was kinda glad he was the first thing she saw. He continued not seeing the shocked and yet terribly sad eyes of Jiraiya, Kakashi, and Sarutobi. Hey Emuro, welcome to the world. This probably isn't the right thing for you to see on your first look, but at least you can see Oniai-san first, isn't that right? He said, cooing the last part, which got a small giggle from the little babe. Kushina watched with sad eyes at her son talk to his baby sister, which to her was his last, her words to her. Minato was on the last hand sign before hesitating and looking at Naruto, only to get his sight he would remember forever in death. Naruto was smiling at Mito while holding her small hand in his own. He saw him talking to Mito, which the little one was giggling and smiling at her Oniai-san. That's when he saw the sideway glance from Naruto, which was so full of determination it shocked him before nodding. Naruto then looked back at Mito and said his last words to her. Mito, I'm afraid Oniai-san is going away now, and Big Brother won't be able to see you grow up into a beautiful woman. He knows you will. I won't be able to protect you at night like a big brother should. I'm sorry I won't be able to help you when you really need it. But know this, I will always be watching over you somewhere. You should know I will always be there even when you don't know it, he said with a strong voice even as he was going very pale. He may be 5 years old, but he was much more mature for his age, and knew this was probably be the last time he would see her. Despite the short years he trained ever since he could walk, his mind would unexpectedly grow beyond his physical appearance. He only told this to his Ka-san and Tu-san and his best friend Itachi. God, he's gonna miss him. Even though Itachi was the same age as him, Itachi was like a little brother to him, always asking for help with his shinobi duties. He just mentally hoped Itachi could get over his death. He looked at Mito, who was looking at him even more now with tears starting to form in her innocent eyes. It was like she could understand what was happening instinctively, and started to cry. He smiled sadly before kissing the crying baby on the forehead once more before looking at a sad Kushina. Ka-san, go ahead, take her. Tu-san is finished, he said, which she nodded before taking the little girl in her arms once more to lullaby her to help calm her down. Naruto looked back to see the shocked spectators and smiled. See ya later, Kakashi Ero-sen and Hokage-sama, he said before Minato shakingly slammed his hands on the ground with his bangs covering the tears falling from his face. Shiki Fuin. Naruto smiled sadly as a flash of erupted around the family of Namikaze and the deathly silent Kyuubi, while a barrier separated them between the now coming shinobi from Konoha to see what the Yodame had planned. Silence. That was what greeted Naruto as he had his eyes closed. That's when he felt something. He doesn't feel pain anymore. He twitched his eyes a bit before opening them to see darkness. He couldn't see anything except the outlining of a ghostly apparition in the darkness in front of him. He couldn't tell what it was, but he did have a suspicion of what it was. The ghostly apparition itself was staring at Naruto's suspended form in the darkness with interest. He knew of the boy, but for some reason something about the boy just interested it to no end. And most mortal don't have the ability to interest a being such as itself. It decided to show itself to the boy after dealing with the ceiling. Back in the Dome of Light you could see the still figures of the Namikaze family, and Kyuubi with Mito silent as well. That's when they all felt it. Death, an embodiment of death itself, slammed on them all except Mito as to not kill the little babe. The ghostly apparition showed itself to be a white-cloaked purple-skinned deity. The appearance of the thing showed its spiky white hair that sticked in all directions as it flowed past its neck. There was also horns sticks out of its head and hair. It looked at them all with calculating yellow piercing eyes that showed wisdom beyond comprehension. It looked before it settled on Kyuubi. It frowned before looking at Minato and Kushina. That's when it linked all the dots. It looked down at Minato's haggard form, who was staring at him with sadness that showed even a mortal could make a god flinch from the sadness in his eyes. He followed his gaze discreetly at Naruto's prone form with his stomach impaled by Kyuubi's claw. The deity frowned before looking upon the forms of Minato and Kushina looking at it. It then started to speak. Mortal, why have you summoned me? It said even though it knew why. It still needed to know everything perfectly. Minato not looking at Naruto prone form for he was sure it would break him up inside state. Shinigami-sama, please I beg you, can you seal the Kyuubi away into my son? He said as tears started to form in his eyes. Shinigami even itself softened its own eyes and stated, Mortal, I can't do such a thing even though your son's chakra coils haven't fully developed yet. It would certainly kill him. Even now your son is stuck in limbo since I haven't passed judgment on the boy yet. Though we can seal it into your other child, it said gazing at the other child. This got shocked and sad reactions from the two, and even Kyuubi was shocked to hear what the Shinigami said. Naruto? In limbo? They looked at Naruto's prone body and Kushina burst into tears seeing his eyes dull of any life in them. Minato started shaking as he dropped to his knees with his head hung low. Kyuubi looked at Naruto's prone body in sadness. It had watched from within Kushina how Naruto grew up and had come to respect him, and now it being the one causing Naruto to die just made it want to die. Shinigami just watched on with an impassive face, not showing the hint of pity in its eyes for the mortals. Minato stopped shaking before looking into Shinigami's own eyes, showing a broken man. Yes, but please, I beg you, Shinigami, let us talk to Mito before we join our son. That's all I ask of you, Shinigami-sama, he said, kneeling before the being with his head on the ground. Shinigami on the outside just looked at the man while on the inside just smiled. It nodded, making Minato smile in happiness, thinking after this he could go see his son on the other side. He walked over to Kushina as they sat in front of Naruto with him facing them. Even if he couldn't actually see them, he will remember the memory of what the family together one last time. The two talked to each other as Minato told Kushina of his plan of sealing part of their chakra in the seals so they could help Mito when she grew up. Kushina agreed to this before she said her last words to Mito, as did Minato. Though they were surprised when Kyuubi itself started to slowly wrap its tails around them all, bringing them closer to each and Naruto prone form. Kushina looked into Kyuubi's eyes to see sadness beyond recognition. She smiled sadly, knowing Kyuubi was back to its true mental stability. They gathered closer to Naruto's body, which instinctively moved a bit, secretly shocking the Shinigami, knowing the boy was still in limbo. So how was his body still moving? They watched as he raised his head to look at them, and even though his eyes were dull of life, he smiled a gentle smile that radiated happiness never seen before. It shined like a sun. Kushina and Minato got up with Mito in Kushina's arms, walked closer to him as Kyuubi's tails closed in around them, and hugged his body, which he did his best, and wrapped his little arms around them as his face was staring straight into Mito's own. This was the image Shinigami saw, and right now the deity had come over its shock and was smiling at the picture. Even now it could feel Naruto in limbo smiling as if he was feeling what his body was doing. It then glanced at Kyuubi, who at the moment was tearing up as the tears fell into its fur. It frowned once more. That monster Madara Uchiha did this, and would be damned if it didn't hunt him down for this. It then saw the family separate just a little before they turned toward Shinigami with determined eyes, knowing they were ready. It inwardly saddened it to let this happen, but even it didn't have the power to break the rules her sister created when this seal was made. That's when she started the sealing. And small author's note: Shinigami, just like Kami, will be portrayed as females in my story. Naruto, who was still in the dark realm as he called it, was sitting on the floor meditating, trying to remember the feeling he just got a few minutes ago. That's when he saw his family around him smiling at him, and the Kyuubis tailed around them protectively. He let a small tear drop from his face, knowing he wouldn't see them again. And like someone was reading his mind, "Oh, I don't know about that," said a feminine voice behind him. Naruto quickly jumped back in a defensive position, only to see a ghostly figure a few feet away from him, and it showed the deity Shinigami with an amused look in its eyes. Naruto just stared at the Shinigami before relaxing just a slight bit to analyze the situation, and remembering who it was, just glared into the eyes of Shinigami, shocking her inwardly since this mortal was only 5 years old, but showed he wasn't afraid of her in this form. Naruto just glared at the specter and god of death before he spoke. "I see you're here to take me into your stomach as well? Then go ahead and take me and Kyuubi," he said, which the Shinigami smiled before it spoke. "First off, you have quite the courage to stand up to me, the goddess of death, like that. And second, let me talk in a better form. This one is just for show," said Shinigami, shocking Naruto before she glowed white before her form started to shrink till it was as tall as Naruto so she could look into Naruto's eyes. When the light dissipated, it showed the body of a 5-year-old girl with straight pitch black hair and porcelain skin that shone beautiful in limbo. Her eyes were that of the purest white. She was wearing a black kimono. She had no footwear from what he could see. That was before he saw her smirking at him. Since he did admittingly look over her body, he looked away from her face, a tint of pink on his face. This action only amused the girl before him even more, since he heard a heavenly chuckle from her which made his heart warm a little. It sounded so much like a melody his Kasan would sing to him when he was little. He regained himself and looked back at her, only to see himself inches from the girl's face. He blushed before taking a step back. This only made her smile as she spoke. "You know, up close you're kinda cute," she said, admitting the honest truth. He was only 5 years old, but in the academy he was one of the most wanted boys in the academy. He was growing up fast since his face was getting more angular from all the training he did. He recomposed himself and stared at her with curious eyes. "You aren't you Shinigami? I mean seriously, Tusan finished the sealing. Shouldn't I be with him in your I don't know," pointing to his stomach, which got a laugh from her. "Kami." Her laugh itself was like a melody. Shinigami shook her head before looking at Naruto. The boy just interested her greatly, even now knowing she was the Shinigami goddess over death, and he seemed to totally unfazed by this. It made her interest him go up higher each time he spoke. But then she remembered the situation at hand and frowned. "Naruto," she said in a stern voice which shook the boy and made him realize she was now serious, so his eyes hardened, since he knew there was a time to goof off and a time to be serious when the situation called for it. This action made Shinigami even more interested in Naruto now. She couldn't wait to tell Kami-chan about this one. She cleared her throat before speaking. "Naruto, I know everything that has happened since Kyuubi attacked Konoha, and I have to say, watching you sacrifice your life for your mother like that even at your age is surprising. Most children would have stayed rooted in the spot, yet you threw yourself in harm's way to save someone precious to you. That is a very admirable thing to do, Naruto." she said with warmth in her voice. Naruto just looked down, smiling sadly, figuring it was his last act of ever seeing his family again. Shinigami saw this and continued, "Unfortunately, things went bad. Your plan, from what I can see, backfired. You died before the sealing could complete itself. And we had to choose another container, and the only one at the time that could cure me was none other," that she said, and that's when she stopped seeing the recognition in Naruto's eyes. Naruto's eyes were wide in terror, figuring his plan would have succeeded, but hearing what happened made him hate himself. He wasn't strong enough to last a bit longer. He thought about what he could do before he snapped his eyes open and raised his head to stare Shinigami in the eye. This action made her flinch, and his eyes showed determination beyond anything she had ever seen. Not one mortal ever had those eyes before, not in history. No one came close to these eyes. These eyes both scared her and intrigued her for some reason. First, she was scared for those that fought against him when his eyes were like that, and two, it excited her to see a mortal make her, a goddess, flinch. Oh yes, she was now fascinated with this one. She then continued, "Despite Naruto's growing aura of that glowed a light blue color. Also, I hate to inform you, but your father and mother weren't able to survive the sealing, since you know of the price of summoning me to your realm. And your mother, the wounds she suffered and the terrible pain of having Kyuubi ripped out of her made her go over the edge. I was able to stop time in the barrier which separate all of them and Kyuubi from the outside world," she said, but was cut off when she felt it. Naruto's aura started rising after each word was spoken, and when she said his parents were his dead, his aura skyrocketed, startling Shinigami. Her eyes were wide open in shock. She now saw Naruto glowing figure shrouded by the waves upon waves of the blue spiral energy. She then hesitantly looked and saw his eyes. They now glowed with an unearthly white outlining the pupil. Naruto couldn't believe it, but hearing it from the goddess herself made Naruto snap. His little sister. She would be all alone in the cursed shinobi world. The world he knew that had too much violence and greedy humans. A world he knew would hurt her. That's when he made a decision that would change the shinobi world forever and make the heavens and hell itself shift. He glared at the shocked goddess of death. "Take me back," he said, with an unearthly wind blew through him and past Shinigami, ruffling her hair and kimono. But this didn't phase. What did was that his Ryatsu was growing much larger than any mortal should, even for a Hokage. This was too much. She heard his words and was about to disagree when she stopped seeing his eyes and saw he wouldn't take a no for an answer, and somehow in the deepest reaches of her body she felt that she needed to say yes. That's when something hit her. His Ryatsu was beyond that of any mortal she had ever seen. He had courage and the guts to go up against anyone despite it being human, demon or god. He wouldn't stop. And the last thing she took in personally was that he would protect his precious people till his dying breath, and then some. That's when she decided on what she wanted to do and knew she would get a tongue lashing from her sister. But even Kami would agree when she sees Naruto later on. Shinigami looks into Naruto's bright blue glowing eyes, hiding her anxiety from seeing such eyes, and spoke. "Then if that is what you want, then I need to ask," she said with an edge at the end of her voice. She glared back into his eyes. "Are you willing to sacrifice your humanity to gain your life back? If you choose to do so, then you will be brought back, but with the knowledge of you being my avatar in the living world. Will you do this?" she said with a serious tone in her voice. This was a decision she actually wanted him to accept. For some reason, imagining him being her avatar sent chills down her spine. Naruto was inwardly shocked at her deal and thought about sacrificing his humanity to come back to life? Being her avatar in the living world? That meant he would have the powers of a Shinigami? He then remembered his baby sister's face and decided with no hesitation, hell yes. I would do anything to protect what family I have left. Be damned if I'm a human or whatever the hell I am. I will still protect my precious people, and nothing will stand in my way of that," he said with his Ryatsu flaring even higher at that point. Shinigami smiled at this before appearing in front of Naruto, surprising him before she caressed his face with both hands. "Then receive the kiss of the Shinigami," she said, and before he could interrupt she captured his lips with her own. This made sparks run down Naruto's spine, since this was his first kiss, and despite his age he was always curious about his first time. So with a little hesitation he kissed back, earning a small moan of surprise from the goddess. He instinctively wrapped his arms around her small frame and leaned in a bit more. This went on a bit more before Naruto's body flashed white. When it dissipated it showed Naruto wearing a different attire. He now wore a white shitage underneath a black kosode. Below this he wore a white hakama underneath a black hakama. The last thing was that he wore a white sash around his waist, and on his feet, replacing his once upon a time shinobi sandals, were white tabi, as his footwear were waraji. Finishing off the look was a giant sword on his back that just oozed Ryatsu. At the moment the goddess of death was still getting out of her little daze until Naruto flashed, and that's when she opened her eyes to see Naruto's transformation. And to say she was shocked was an understatement. Never before did she think Naruto would become something like this, for she was seeing a ghostly image of a mask on his face. She shook herself as she looked at her now avatar to the real world, and she honestly couldn't be happier of who she had chosen. Naruto blinked before looking at himself and saw his different attire before shrugging. It wasn't important at the moment. He looked back up to see the goddess looking at his form in shock before recomposing herself. "Well, now that you have become my avatar, there are some things you need to know, though I'm pretty sure you'll get to know most of what you are later on. All I have to say is that you truly only answer to me and no one else, even your Hokage. No one is your true leader except for myself, and when I call for you it is either that I need a soul taken when I am too busy to do so, Also, there will be times when I have to call upon you to get rid of people tampering in Kami or my territories. Do you understand? She said, which Naruto nodded, already having knowledge of what he is going through his mind. She smiled before bringing him into a hug that shocked him before he embracing the warmth. Now it's time for you to go. But before you do, my name isn't Shinigami, it's actually, she said hesitantly, for no mortal knew her name, and this would be the first one to ever know, besides Kami. Naruto looked at her curiously until she looked back at him, and said, my name is Megami, she uttered. He just blinked before smiling. That's a wonderful name. Megami has a nice ring to it, he said before he remembered the happenings in the living world and all sense of playfulness erased from his body. Megami blushed at his compliment, before seeing the change in his demeanor. Naruto had to go back to the living world fast. I guess it's time for you to go for now. But remember, the Abolites of being my avatar will come to you in time, I promise. But for now you have to go back, she said with a hint of sadness in her voice. Naruto just stiffly nodded, and with that Megami snapped her finger, and a flash of light erupted from the darkness. As he closed in on them, Naruto smiled at Megami, surprising her a bit. Megami-sama, will you do me a favor and tell my parents Amuro-chan will be protected? He said, which she smiled before nodding, and with that the light covered them both. As it did so, Naruto swore he heard a faint voice from Megami saying, goodbye for now, my avatar, soon will we see each other again, and honestly I can't wait for that to happen. He smiled before he accepted the light, bringing him back to his world. So this way he can still protect what family he has left in the world. In the living world outside the barrier was half the Umbu, the Hokage, with Kakashi and Jiraiya. They had all watched as Minato do some kind of seal before this barrier had erupted. Some had tried to destroy it using every jutsu they knew, but nothing had worked, so they decided to wait for it to finish, though they were very worried for Naruto when they saw him impaled on Kyuubi's claw before they vanished in the light. That's when they heard a crack and they looked up to see a barrier cracking before more cracks appeared, before shattering and a blinding white light erupting from inside, blinding them all from what could be seen. When it died down, they had looked up to see a sight that would forever be in everyone's mind that day. Naruto was there dressed in his normal attire, holding on to his baby sister, as he sat between his parents who were holding on to each other smiling. Naruto was standing between their bodies with his sister held tightly against himself, with his head held down, his bangs covering his eyes. When he looked up, he looked at the now shocked spectators. His once blue eyes were now glowing with a supernatural blue that some took a step back. While some who were friends with Naruto, namely some of the Umbu and Kakashi and Jiraiya, were gobsmacked and were wondering what happened. Sarutobi, though, was the first one to get over his shock first before taking the situation at hand, and saw how his predecessor was dead along with his wife, leaving behind their now alive son and newborn daughter. He looked at Naruto, and from the time he seen the kid graduate at the age that was unnatural from the little time he was on his team, never once had he seen his eyes like they were. He was honest with himself, those eyes scared him for some reason. Naruto looked down at his parents' bodies and smiled sadly before looking his baby sister, and smiling warmly at her sleeping face. He looked at the ceiling on her belly glowing red and mentally nodded. He saw the only influence from the ceiling was the whisker marks on her face. He bent his head just a little bit, kissing her forehead once more, and whispered his words that somehow echoed around the area. Don't worry, Amuro-chan, Oniai-san is here for you, and he's gonna protect you from anyone and anything, even if he has to face the devil itself, he whispered, which somehow got a small smile from the red-headed babe. He looked down at his parents' bodies and took out 2 storage scrolls. He was gonna have them buried where they wanted. He wasn't about to let the council, or even Sarutobi, decide this, only him. He sealed them into the scrolls and pocketed them into a pouch. He looked back at the spectators and walked over to them. As he did so, he ignored the astonished looks he was getting or the suspicious glares aimed at his sister. When one did, he would glare back, making them freeze in their tracks. He walked right up to Sarutobi and looked him right in the eye. Hokage-sama, I'm sure you already know what's happened, as do you, Jiraiya-san, but right now I don't care what you do, cause right now I have a little sister to take care of, he said, and before they could stop him he jumped back into the woods heading for the Namikaze compound. He knew what he just did would be called into question, and there was also gonna be a council meeting for what happened and him being called in. Well, he didn't care at the moment. What he did care about was protecting his baby sister. He knew for a 5-year-old taking care of a child would be hard, but he wouldn't give, and he wouldn't let others take care of her, since he didn't trust most except for a select few. Hell, he didn't trust Kakashi or Jiraiya. They might be family friends, it was just something about them told him not to trust them completely. And Sarutobi, he didn't trust that man at all. He knew he would take after the village more than a Hokage's family, and would try to announce something to the public to quell down their questions. If it did come to that, hell hath no fury like a brother's wrath, for not even Kami would stop him from unleashing his rage upon those that would try to hurt his sister. When Naruto reached the compound, he entered in before activating the security seals around the compound and area to not let anyone in. He then went to his now sister's room that was beside his own and saw everything in order, from the little crib with plush toys to, oddly enough, an orange-colored fox as well. Then the diapers to the blankets. He remembered his costs and buying food for when she was hungry and storing them in the kitchen. He looked at his sister, seeing her sleeping. He smiled before sitting in the rocking chair and laying Mito on his chest, letting her sleep. He then covered them up with a blanket, and he started letting himself fall asleep. He would be doing this a lot to be sure she was safe. Megami, who was watching through the mirror, looked at her side and saw the parents of the two smiling warmly at the scene. She smiled as well before she started to explain why they were here. With that, the legacy of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, Mito Uzumaki Namikaze, and the avatar of the goddess of death Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze began. Next day we find Naruto waking up to look down, seeing a little snoring babe. He smiled before picking her up and going down to the kitchen to get her something to eat. That's when he heard knocking. He heard it coming from the front door, and as he walked over to it he discreetly pulled out a kunai to make sure it wasn't an enemy. He opened the door to see his panting longtime friend Itachi Uchiha. He smiled. This was probably the only person he truly trusted in Konoha, though he frowned when he saw the worried look on his friend's face. Itachi, who was panting to get here as fast as he could, looked up to see his best friend looking at him with curiosity and confusion. He needed to hurry before the personal Anbu of the Hokage came. That's when he saw the bundle in his arms, and he remembered his mother saying something about Kushina having another child. He smiled despite the situation coming at hand. He shook his head before looking at Naruto again. Naruto-ni-san, hurry, you need to get to the council chambers. They have ordered the Hokage's personal guard to come get you. I got here as fast as I could before them, he said, which Naruto frowned at before looking at his sister. Then he looked at Itachi with the same eyes he had the night before. This froze Itachi in place. His surrogate brother was staring at him with eyes he had never seen before. They looked like they were the eyes of a warrior, someone who would travel through the 9 levels of hell and back to protect his precious people. Naruto saw Itachi's look but ignored it for more important matters. I knew this would happen. Itachi, do me a favor, hold Mito and stay in this house till I come back. I personally don't trust anyone except you with her, so please keep her safe inside the house, okay? He said, holding Mito to Itachi. Said Uchiha hesitated before holding on to Mito. He looked down and immediately smiled seeing her sleeping face. As for myself, I'm going to have a talk with the council, and also Itachi. If she gets hungry, the food is in the kitchen in the pantry. I'll be back, alright? He said, which Itachi nodded at since he knew from experience taking care of his little brother Sasuke. Naruto smiled before jumping through the forest to get this meeting over with. That's when he met up with the Anbu guards, the personal guardians of the Hokage. He frowned before he saw the leader coming up to him. Naruto-san, you have been requested at the council chambers by the Hokage to discuss of what happened during the Kyuubi attack last night, he said. Naruto nodded before heading his way with the Anbu following him. When they were passing through Konoha, he saw the destruction Kyuubi had left in its wake and the people who were rebuilding. When some saw him, they were whispering to each other before getting back to work. Naruto just ignored them. He didn't really care of what they had to say. He honestly didn't care for Konoha in general, only the people that were his friends. That's when they stopped at the Hokage tower. Once inside, they lead him to the chambers. He could actually feel the feeling of nervousness coming from a few people that were staring at him as they walked to the doors. He frowned. It was like he was walking to his execution. Once at the doors, he was getting irritated, and before the Anbu could open the door, he did it himself, the way his Kasan used to, kicking them open, making a bang echo around the chambers, silencing the arguing that was happening. The whole council, and Hokage included, looked to see Naruto with a twitching eyebrow with a nervous Anbu squad behind them. What is it you have called me here for? He said with the edge to his voice which made a few raise an eyebrow at. Sarutobi quickly cleared his throat before someone took offense to what Naruto just said. He looked at Naruto. Nothing, Naruto-kun. Only to find out what happened at the Kyuubi attack, and I'd suggest you don't lie. We need to know the truth, he said. This made Naruto physically scowl, remembering the event. He then mentally decided to do this only to get the council off his back on the topic. He explained everything except of his business with the goddess of death. How she was used at the container of the ceiling of Kyuubi. This got many scowls from the civilian side. He ended it there when he took Mito away from the area so Sarutobi could clean up the area. After his explanation, the civilian side erupted. We have to kill the demon while it's weak. The seal is sure to break soon. We have the chance to end Kyuubi now. The Kyuubi is weakened. We have the chance to end it once and for all, screeched a pink-haired woman. Naruto was trembling with anger as the few clan heads that were friends with Minato and Kushina knew of their skills in sealing and knew that there was no way of that seal breaking. Uchiha Fugaku though was frowning as he looked at Naruto. The boy himself was best friends with his genius son Itachi and knew that there was something he wasn't gonna tell them. Sarutobi schooled his features as the civilians kept complaining, but that stopped when he saw Naruto trembling. His eyes widened when he saw a little glance in his eye. The shinobi council that was Sarutobi's old teammates Koharu, Hamura and Shimura Danzo were neutral on what to think actually as they had glances at each other. Naruto had enough of the death threats and spite against his sister, so he raised his head, snapped his eyes open, which changed from the sapphire blue they were to the white of his eyes being pure black and the pupil being a golden yellow, and practically roared. If you don't shut your mouth this instant, so help Kami, I won't stop myself from killing every single piece of shit civilian in here. Do you understand me? He yelled as his chakra actually exploded around him, making a crater where he stood while the windows shattered as well. The walls and ceiling as well started to creak and crack from his unleashed chakra. The civilians practically fell down gasping for breath while the clan heads were looking at Naruto in shock. Weltsum was sporting a devilish grin. Yep, Naruto was definitely Kushina and Minato's son. Sarutobi was staring at Naruto in utter shock. To threaten the civilians like that he hasn't seen except from Kushina or Minato when they were pissed, and from the brief glance he saw in Naruto's eyes he knew it would happen again if they crossed the line with him. The Anbu that were close to Naruto were blowed back a few feet as well. When the chakra pressure had cooled down a bit, Naruto snapped open his eyes glaring at the civilians, making them go pale. If I ever hear you say that again, I hold my promise and kill you without a shred of remorse. That goes for every single person in here," he said, pointing to everyone. "Mito Uzumaki Namikaze is my baby sister, and despite me only being 5 years old, I will fight to the death to protect her from the enemies outside of Konoha and the ones on the inside. That includes those that would try to hurt her physically or mentally. They will die by my hand. And you Hokage-sama won't stop me either," he said, making Saruobi go wide-eyed as well as the rest of the council. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze just threatened the governing body of Konoha with death if they tried to hurt his baby sister in any way. Civilians were either red in the face, pissed at how this boy threatened them with death if they tried to in their minds kill the demon, or they were pale thinking he was speaking the truth. The clan's heads, even Fugaku, were doing their best to hold back a smirk. Naruto definitely shut them up with that threat. Naruto turned toward Sarutobi and spoke, "If that is all, Hokage-sama, I have to go take care of my sister at the moment," he said before he started walking back to the doors. Sarutobi snapped out of his shock before speaking, "Wait, we aren't finished here yet, Naruto-kun. I have decided to announce to the public about Mito's status as a Jinchuriki, only for them be put under a law that will sign if they speak of it to the younger generation they will be put to death," he said, speaking the truth since he had planned on this to happen just in case. The civilians looked at Sarutobi like he was an idiot for saying they should be punished, only to get a warning glance from the man which shut them up quickly. Naruto on the outside was impassive, but on the inside he was furious with Sarutobi for what he was doing. He was practically announcing to the public his baby sister was a big target to them. He balled up his fists, which started making his knuckles turn white and blood dripping from his hand. He looked over his shoulder at Sarutobi and glared at him. "Very well, but be warned, Sarutobi," this got gasps from everyone. He disrespected the Hokage. "Even if they mumble a single insult or try anything, they will die no matter what you say. This is clan business at the moment, and they try to hurt or kill an heir of our clan, and if they try anything, not even you will stop me from killing anyone that tries it. Be damned, them civilians or clan members, anyone that tries will meet their end by myself," he said before walking out the door, ignoring the gawking from the whole entire council. Sundo was now grinning. Naruto was now appointed as the first person in her book to shut up the council, threaten the Hokage, and now threaten clan heads as well. Oh yes, Naruto was definitely Kushina's son, and the years went on like normal, except Naruto had buried his parents in the field of their clan home, marking it with a tombstone with the Namikaze and Uzumaki symbol. It stated, "Here lies two of the most well-loved people in Konoha, Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze, mother and father of two. These two were powerful in their right, stronger than anyone of their generation and above. Though they died fighting the Kyuubi, they still died with a smile on their face. They will be missed by all, but much more by the children they protected." Over the years, also after the announcement was made, the villagers were like Naruto predicted, hateful, and tried everything, but they only ended up getting killed by Naruto or arrested before he got to them. Sometimes it was a match between himself and the Hokage as to who would get to them first. Also, as he took care of Mito, he had to sped up his training to go on missions to help take care of himself and Mito. So with astonishable speed he sped through the ranks of the shinobi, making Chunin at the age of 7, Jounin at the age of 9, and shockingly, and with the respect of the whole Anbu Captain Commander at the age of 13, something that shocked everyone. But his best friend Itachi has also grown and rose through the ranks and became Anbu Captain at the age of 13. They both were respected in Konoha and prodigies never seen in a century. Over the years, Naruto had made friends with plenty of people from the Inuzuka clan heir Hana, also with Yugao Yuzuki, Kurinai Yuhi and Anko Mitarashi. Jiraiya over the years had come to visit them, and the first time he came he was given a decision from Naruto on who he would help more if the time came to it. Him and Mito or Sarutobi. It took a while, but Jiraiya had gotten Naruto's full respect and trust when he bowed his head, saying he would help them when the time came. Naruto had also visited Itachi during the years with Mito, and was accepted by some in the Uchiha clan, especially by Mikoto and little Sasuke. Fugaku though was shrewd to Naruto and would at chances glare at the little Mito. Mito, over the years she had grown up like a little Kushina. She was quite the tomboy and had the fiery attitude Kushina had. Though when she trained she excelled in Kenjutsu, Taijutsu and surprisingly Fuinjutsu. Although when she had trouble her Oni-san would help her when she needed it. That was something else. She completely adored her big brother. He was her hero, the one who protected her, told her stories of her parents, held her when she cried after hearing what was sealed inside her. She was told by him since he didn't want others to mix up the words to make her think differently. He was there to help her when she needed it. She looked up to Naruto and trained to be like him. Naruto though raised her to be who she wanted to be. He couldn't break her of the habit of playing pranks, something he found very enjoyable. He himself of the years had grown beyond what others knew ever since that night with the Kyuubi attack and him meeting Megami. He had received information a week later about his role in Abelites as her avatar, and when he learned that they had different Abelites he pushed himself even farther to master them. Though he did this in secret, no one knew of this, not even Itachi knew, though the man suspected something. Naruto overall was stronger than anyone ever knew. As a shinobi he was holding quite a bit back from everyone, even the Hokage, who he at the moment was starting to hate as the years went by. He was always training when he had the time, using Kage Bushins when he could, not many to make him get chakra exhaustion, but still many. At the moment he was a Fujitsu master, ninjutsu expert. He was fluent in taijutsu, matching guy himself. In Kenjutsu he was unmatched by everyone. He could wield a katana masterfully like he had done it his whole life. Secretly he had read the notes on his father's Hiraishin no Jutsu and decided he would make that a type of ninjutsu class called Jikken Kuken. He had secretly made a few jutsu if the situation called for it, but at the moment he hasn't showed it to anyone. He also learned one technique he took great pleasure in. It was called Hoho or Shunpa. It was something needed with spiritual energy. It was a speed movement skill that increased his speed beyond measures. Though when he mastered it he never stopped training to get him even faster than before. He could honestly say if he told anyone of his true status that he was as fast as his father when he used the Hiraishin no Jutsu, though he was proficient to him anyway as a shinobi. He quite immersed himself in being Megami's avatar, and through the years he meditated and finally met his Zanpakuto spirit, and when he did he was shocked to see a young teen around his age wearing a black cloak with tiered ends at the bottom. The man had introduced himself as his inner spirit, and Naruto couldn't have been happier. The guy reminded him of himself when he was doing a mission. Over the years he learned that the teen's name was Zangetsu. That day also sparked when his weapon he received at becoming Megami's avatar changed forever. It changed into a giant cleaver that was as tall as he was and grew as he did. The sharpened end was white with the blunt end black as night. The handle had no guard and had what looked like medical tape wrapped around it, leaving behind a long flowing end of it when he unveiled it. His Zanpakuto had told him that it was called Shurikai, a form that manifested what his spirit was. He also learned techniques called Kido. They were like ninjutsu and fuinjutsu, but so much different than the others. He had learned that you concentrate your spiritual energy and speak the incantation instead of doing hand signs like ninjutsu. Over the years he had practiced and mastered a few that were ranked from 1 to 80 on all classes, ranging from Bakudo and Heido. He learned that one was for sealing or stopping one target, or multiple, and the other was like the other except it was more of the offensive spells. He heard of Mito mentioning something about Kyubi, and he was shocked to hear that Kyubi said she was sorry. And from what Mito had told him of what little she could, she said Kyubi was sorry for what she had done, and explained all that happened. He decided on that day Madara Uchiha was his prime target. Also during his duties and raising Mito he made himself a reputation among Konoha as the demon's guardian. Though he didn't care what they said, he brought that title up full blast when he crucified a villager to the wall in Konoha Square for punching Mito. After that incident he was looked at with fear and anger at the same time, knowing if they tried to get to Mito they would die by his hand alone. As the captain commander of the Umbu Corps he was respected beyond anything with them, and that with his position he never showed his face or identity to enemy villages. Though that didn't mean he doesn't have enemies in Konoha as well. The first was the villagers in Konoha. They always tried to hurt Mito, and he would stop and kill those that even tried. Those that did land a hit on her was tortured with the genjutsu of them watching as Naruto killed their family before killing them when they're physically and mentally broken. Another enemy was the council. After the council meeting all those years ago he had made an enemy of the civilians and the respect and protection of the Inuzuka, Aburame, Nara, Yamanaka and Akamichi. Fugaku though was neutral to him, as well was Hayashi for reasons unknown. The elders were always pushing for Mito to be made as a weapon or executed or made as a breeding stock when she was old enough. This made Naruto unleash chakra, slamming them into the ground and ripping off one of their limbs to make the point across if they tried. He was watching. And lastly was Hiruzen. The man was always trying to take Mito away from him, claiming he was too young to raise the child. Well, he proved him wrong after all these years, and with the protection of over half the clan heads he was protected from the Hokage's attempts. He knew what the man was trying to do. He was trying to have her either live on the streets or live in his clan compound to separate her from him and make her loyal only to Konoha and trained as a weapon for only Sarutobi. He stopped that immediately with the Fire Daimyo's presence, and since the man was a long-time friend of Minato he was willing to help out. At the moment we find Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze walking down the road to the academy to pick up his now 8-year-old sister from the academy. As he passed through the streets he ignored the glares from the men or lust-filled looks from the women. That's right. Naruto was getting those looks, it seems, from him being the last male of his clan, and added with his look he was one of the most wanted men in Konoha. At the moment the Namikaze had grown to 5 feet 7 inches and wore his normal attire of black shinobi sandals, black jounin pants, and a long-sleeved black shirt. Over this was a umbu chestplate with 2 pouches on his right and left thigh. One for shuriken, kunai, senbo and ninja wire. The other was for storage scrolls and customized seal tags. He was wearing metal-plated fingerless gloves as well as a Konoha headband tied around his waist like a belt. He had a umbu standard ninjato on his back as well as his kitsune mask on the side of his face, showing himself to the public. The mask was Mito's idea and he did it for her, and plus it really scared the populace when they saw it. Over all this was a black trench coat with the Uzumaki and Namikaze symbol of the back as well as Umbu Kaiaputen Commander, Umbu Captain Commander, in kanji. As he walked the people went around him since his aura just screamed danger to those that pissed him off. When he reached the academy he frowned seeing Mito sitting on a swing being glared at by the civilian families. Some were scowling at her while some were spouting insults at her. His blood began to boil before walking to his sister. As he did so, the hidden Umbu who just arrived as the personal bodyguards for Commander mentally gulped and knew their commander wasn't gonna show pity to those villagers even if children were with them. When Naruto was behind the families, he raised his hand and grabbed one civilian's head and with surprising strength lifted the man who was one of the few spouting insects at his sister and actually threw him into a wall, making it crack and cave in. After he did this, he ignored the frightened looks he was getting from the children or horrified looks from the adults and walked up to Mito as the crowd made way for him. When that was done, he walked up to the sad Mito who had her head hung low with her red hair covering her eyes. Naruto saw the tears falling down her face before he got on his knees and spoke. "Hey there, Mito-chan, ready to go home?" he said. Mito went rigid. She knew that voice. She snapped her head up to see Naruto smiling at her warmly as the tears fell from her face. "Naruto and I-san," she yelled before jumping onto his chest, hugging him. He smiled while patting her head. As he did so, he looked back at the glaring crowd and released a burst of his ki, shutting them up. He then looked back at Mito and sees her looking at him with cheerful violet eyes. He smiled before speaking. "Well, ready to go home, Mito-chan?" he said. "Yeah, but first can we go to Ichiraku? I'm hungry and I want to see old man Tochi and I am Ne-san," she said, which he smiled again. Those two were probably the only civilians that respected Tosan's wish and helped her when he wasn't around. "Sure, let's go," he said before putting her on his shoulder and walking out of the Shinobi Academy fields. As he did so, he looked on ahead, thinking on what his latest mission had detailed. It seemed IWA was getting restless since they found out Minato and Kushina, two of the most hated people in IWA, had children, and since they didn't know of his status as Captain Commander and heard of Mito, they were trying anything to kill her, even risking war. He scowled as his eyes flashed a bright blue that wasn't gonna happen anytime soon as long as he was alive. He looked up at a grinning Mito and smiled. His sister was his light, if he had to say. She was the thing that kept him from obliterating Konoha from the ground it sits on. If it wasn't for her, Itachi, Yugao, and some of his friends, he would have done it and slaughtered most of Konoha's population. "Hey Mito-chan, wanna go see Itachi and his family later on?" he said, which her eyes snapped wide and grinned before jumping on his shoulder. Yeah, let's go. I wanna see Itachi and I again," she said. Naruto smirked before walking ahead, not knowing the future was going to be full of strife for him and Mito. 2 years later. It's been 2 years and things have went great for Naruto and Mito. The two, along with Naruto's friends, have been able to keep the council and villagers off his back because of Mito. Though Sarutobi was getting desperate and would often challenge him in clan laws on ways to adopt a child from an unfit parent, Naruto always countered by saying he has raised Mito and she turned out great and wouldn't let him turn her into a tool for him to use and discard. Though their training along with Itachi's went great, Mito, with the help of her brother, was at high genin level alone with the studies and training she had done. She was intermediate in Fuinjutsu, low chunin in ninjutsu. Genjutsu was non-existent except to be able to dispel all with the help from Kyubi. Her taijutsu with the help of her brother was high chunin, and with her mother's sword and help from Naruto she was high chunin to low jounin in Kenjutsu. Overall she was quite the skilled shinobi. Though she never stopped thanking Naruto whenever he helped her train. Itachi was someone Naruto was positive he could call a brother. The teen was to him a little broader, looking for ways to either get out of situations without violence or ending it quick. He helped Itachi get stronger for the past 2 years, and even before that, he helped Itachi get stronger to be one of the most powerful shinobi in Konoha. Naruto himself, though, hadn't changed all that much except for being a 15-year-old. He could beat Sarutobi now. Even if the man was in his prime, he wouldn't stand a chance. No one knew Naruto's true power except Zangetsu. Though Itachi always suspected something. His skills as a shinobi have only went up more since the last 2 years being the captain commander of the Anbu Corps. His skills in ninjutsu were extraordinary. Fuinjutsu he had passed his father in the art, and was on par and close to passing his mother's level as well. Taijutsu was something he added with his kenjutsu with him, always doing physical exercises that would make guys say it was crazy to do, made him pass guys' level and beyond. Kenjutsu was something he took pride in, and could honestly say the 7 swordsmen couldn't hold a candle to him. His speed added with the power of each swing was uncatchable and looked nothing except a blur. His skills as a shinigami have skyrocketed though as he grew up over the last 2 years. His talking with Zangetsu and training in the art of Kido had done wonders. He had grew more attached to the Zanpakuto like it was his arm he was swinging instead. And with Kido he had mastered 81 to 99, though the latest ones on both Bakudo and Heido still needed a bit more practice. He had also created a way of healing with Kido, but needed no incantations. Just concentrated spiritual energy. His speed though with Ho-Oh had went past even Zangetsu's expectations. He was nigh uncatchable in that aspect. No one was as fast as he was. Though no one has seen his true power yet anyway. Although his greatest achievement was raising to the next level of his Zanpakuto something called Bankai, Zangetsu had said was only done before by Megami herself. He was quite proud he achieved the next level, though it was hard to control at first. But he had done it, and had to say Bankai was only gonna be a last resort when he needed it. Though even if he was stronger than anyone even truly knew, he wasn't arrogant, and flaunted his abilities. He was cool-headed, and emotionally balanced to handle any situation that called for it. Though there was a share of problems as well. First off, Konoha's civiline populace was getting more brave to actually try and attack him head on with a few shinobi as well, thinking they had him outnumbered. They were wrong and paid the price. He made an example out of them and showed their mutilated corpse that if they tried it again he would do something far worse than this. That shut them up only for them to come back a week later in bigger numbers. Also, IWA was getting much more desperate, and it showed when they sent an assassin to kill Naruto and Mito. When this happened and Naruto stopped and killed the assassin, he had placed the body in a box and written a message to the Tsuchikage that if he tried again he would be starting something he would regret later on. This didn't deter the IWA Kage, it actually made him try harder and harder than before. It was putting the strain of war breaking out once more. There was also another problem, but it was within his own mind. There was something trying to get out, and he didn't know what it was, and he had asked Zangetsu only to get a silent "I don't know" myself. This kind of freaked him out, but didn't stop him from his life. Though everything changed when the day came when the Tsuchikage declared war on Konoha. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, shinobi of Konoha, avatar to Megami goddess of death, and Umbu Kaioputen commander was standing around his personal squad, the ones he had grew up with and trained with. Each were strong in their own right. And right now they were having a meeting about the declaration of war with Konoha, all because of a grudge from IWA. First one to speak was Nico aka Yugao Yuzuki. Naruto commander, so what are we to do with the situation at hand? War has been declared by IWA, and we personally don't have the resources for another war, she said. Weasel aka Itachi Uchiha and Naruto's best friend nodded. That's true, sir. After the third shinobi war and Kyuubi's attack, we just don't have the shinobi to win this war. I know we've pulled through and through in history through all three wars, but this time it's different. We are limited to shinobi and resources. It would personally take a miracle to win this war, sir, he said in a monotone voice. Inu aka Hana Inuzuka hung her head. Yeah. And it's even worse with half of Konoha calling for a trade with you and Mito-chan to stop the upcoming war, she said as a tear fell from her face. Shiyugao turned their attention to Mito, who was sleeping on the couch. Naruto were now as cold as ice and the temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. The others tensed up as they saw their leader's gaze. Let them try and trade us, because just like IWA, those fools in Konoha will suffer for their insolence. He stood up with his battle gear ready, informed the Hokage that I'll be going to Iwa's borders to deal with the invading force myself, he said, getting shocked looks from them all. What? Naruto-senpai, master, you can't be serious, said Yugao. We know you're strong, Naruto, but to face a battalion alone of Chunin and elite Jounin would even be tough for the Hokage to deal with, and you're saying you are gonna go face 3 battalions alone? Hana protested, not wanting her friend to go in something like that alone. Naruto smirked and tightened his gloves. You forget, Hana-chan, that my father was capable of such a feat, and lastly, he said with his eyes narrowed, don't compare me to that old fool. He is nowhere even close to my level, and I'm stronger than I look, he stated, and they still looked skeptic until Itachi spoke up. Senpai is right. He alone can deal with the invading force without any help, he said with a small smile on his face. Besides, even when I fight him, he never revealed all of his skills, and plus he isn't the Umbu captain commander for nothing. But what about Mito-chan? With you gone and us being on guard, she'll be defenseless, Hana asked. It's already being taken care of, he said, and that was when a puff of smoke exploded into the room and the others jumped to their feet with their blades ready, until it cleared, revealing a grinning Jiraiya. Fear not, younglings, because your savior the gallant Jiraiya is here too. Bam! Thud! An annoyed Naruto gave the man a brain duster to the skull and sending him face first into the ground, causing his subordinates to sweat drop. Now's not the time, Erokyofa, Naruto said in an annoyed tone. Said Sannin got up, rubbing the back of his head, glaring at his godson. Mito sat up, stirring in her sleep, and slowly opened her eyes to see her godfather, and her eyes lit up. Before Jiraiya could make an retort at his student's son, a red blur glomped his leg, made him stumble back a little. He looked down and saw Mito look up at him with a grin on her face. He grinned back and picked her up. Well, if it isn't my favorite godchild Mito-chan, he said, and tickled her sides, making her giggle. Naruto smiled at this. Despite being a pervert to women, he loved Mito to death and always tried to spoil her when Naruto wasn't around. Guess what? Me and you are going on a little field trip while your brother deals with those bakas from IWA, he said, making her eyes light up. As for you, Naruto, be careful out there, because I'll drag you out of limbo and beat the crap out of you if you leave your Amuto here all alone. He sighed in a serious tone. Naruto just snorted before walking over to his Kyofu and Mito. When he looked at Mito, he saw her worried eyes and smiled. He put a hand on her head and ruffled her hair, making her pout cutely as he spoke. That's not gonna happen, Kyofu. I wouldn't even dream of leaving her alone, and especially with a pervert like you, he said with a teasing grin. Jiraiya just glared at his godson before smiling and patting him on the back. Naruto just nodded at him before looking once more at Mito. I'll see you later, Mito-chan. Be good for Erokyofu now, you hear? He said, which she just smiled, though he could see in her eyes that she was planning something. Of course, and I wouldn't dare, she said with a oh so innocent tone. Naruto just grinned before kissing her forehead, making a tint of pink appear on her face. Kyuubi within Mito's seal watched on and grinned. Oh, is little Mito-chan feeling embarrassed that her big, strong brother kissed her? Kyuubi said. This made Mito blush bright red. And no, it isn't like that, Mito said, but she could still hear Kyubi snickering. Then, I'll see you later. Then he looked at Jiraiya and nodded. The man nodded as well before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Naruto then looked at his squad and gave out his order. Alright then, you know your orders, move out, he said. Hi. They saluted before dispersing. Kami's realm. Within the realm of Kami was two figs watching through a glowing screen of the happening in the elemental countries. These two figures were both female from the curves you could see and the female features they had. The first was Megami Goddess of Death. She had changed her body to that of a 16-year-old woman. She was wearing the same kimono from when she first met Naruto, but it hugged her perfect hourglass figure and didn't leave anything to imagine. Her breasts were a perky C cup and the kimono showed a bit of cleavage. The other was Kami Goddess of Life and sister to Megami. She had pale porcelain skin like her sister, but had low flowing silver hair with glowing golden eyes that radiated power and wisdom. She was wearing the exact opposite of her sister, but no footwear. She wore a white kimono hugging her figure, as well exposing her perfectly round and perky breasts. Kami at the moment was watching her sister's avatar heading to war. She had at first heatedly disagreed with her sister on giving a human her blessing, since the last time they did that it only threw the world it is now into chaos. But that was squashed down as she watched the boy no man grow up and train to get stronger, and she, like her sister, was at first perplexed and interested in Naruto. She and Megami though frowned when they saw him heading off to war, though they knew this would happen sooner or later. All taught, she and her sister secretly wanted to see what Naruto was capable of. IWA Border. 3 battalions of IWA Nin consisting of Chunin, Elite Jounin, and ANBU were waiting with anticipation to break into Konoha and kill the last Namikaze as well as make the village pay for what Minato and Kushina did during the war. As they were about to break the border, their eyes widened in horror when they saw the son of their most hated enemy appear before them, walking towards their position with a stone-cold and murderous gaze locked onto them. They all started to get nervous as his gaze was so much similar to Minato's. Don't be afraid. Just because he's the son of that man and his bitch of a wife doesn't mean he can take on all of us, the commander said of the battalion stated until they were all finding it quite difficult to breathe because Naruto was using his spiritual pressure to make them all break into cold sweat and swore they saw a menacing figure with a scythe hovering over Naruto. For that comment on my mother you'll be the last to die, Naruto said in a dark and dangerous tone before holding out his right hand, and in a flash of light Zangetsu appeared wrapped up fully with medical tape. He unveiled it showing his partner in all his glory. This intimidated quite a few of the already terrified IWA Nin. He suddenly took a step and vanished, causing them to go on the defense, and unknown to them, he was already cutting them down at speeds that surpassed even his father's. Was that the Hiraition? One Jounin asked his colleagues, but Naruto appeared in front of 3 squads with Zangetsu drawn out, and the next that happened was forever plastered on the IWA commander's face. Blood, limbs, and screams of pure agonizing pain filled the air as the 3 squadrons were all cut to shreds and were either dead or close to dying. No, that was a technique I created and learned called Shuinpa or Flash Step. He vanished once again, and in slow motion appeared behind the only remaining ninja. And the one I just killed you with is currently called Senka, he said as he sheathed his blade on his back, and blood shot out of the IWA commander's chest area where the heart is and spinal column. And as for your Tsuchikage, he and his village are about to get a wake-up call. He finished as the man fell to his knees. Damn you Namikaze, he coughed out and fell to the ground. No, damn your village and your leader's ignorance, fool, he said, and starts to leave the area. As he does so, he mentally feels that feeling again, like someone or something trying to erupt from his mind. He shook his head and shunposed to the IWA village. Anoki, the current Tsuchikage of Iwagakure, wasn't happy and at the moment was slamming his fists onto his desk. Why? Because an ANBU he sent to check up on the invading force on Konoha came back and told him that they were all massacred with no survivors. As he pondered on what he was going to do next, he looked out his window and his eyes widened in terror and horror as he saw Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze hovering over the village and staring right at the man, and then aimed his right hand at the tower. This is a message to you and anyone else who dares to harm those precious to me, you old fool. Heido #88.Hiryuji Shintenreiho. Flying dragon striking heaven shaking thunder cannon. He called out as he fires a gigantic beam of electrical and spiritual energy that hits the Kage Tower, and truly an enormous explosion that not only engulfs the tower, but 1/4 of the village as well. As Naruto watched the mayhem he caused, he felt slightly guilty for killing the innocent, but if it wasn't their leader then none of this would have happened. With that he turned around and shunpoed away, leaving his mark and message at the entrance of the gate. It stated, "You wanted a war. Well, you got one and paid the price for it." From Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. This event was recorded in history called the Massacre of IWA, Kami's realm. The 2 goddess who had seen the destruction was shocked at how strong Naruto was and how he handled IWA. It was just too fast even for them. Megami, though, was beaming with pride. Her avatar was making her feel the ultimate feeling of pride, knowing the man walking the living world was her embodiment on earth, the one who represented death to those that crossed her. Kami, though, was staring at Naruto with half-lidded eyes that showed a emotion Megami had caught, and she smirked. It was lust. At her avatar. Oh yes, she couldn't wait to start teasing her about this piece of information. Fire Country Border. After leaving IWA in chaos and killing most of its shinobi that followed after him, he had arrived in record time at the border in Fire Country. He then bit his finger and swiped it over his hand and started doing hand signs. Shokin Ribesu, reverse summoning, he stated before vanishing in a puff of smoke. With Jiraiya. As Jiraiya played with Mito around on the Toad Mountain, he couldn't help but be a little worried for his godson. Going against IWA alone was suicide to any normal human. Sure, Minato did the same thing and came out with a victory that ended the Third Shinobi War, but even he had trouble standing after pushing his body past its limits. As he caught Mito hiding behind a tree, he heard a puff of smoke and turned around to see his godson appear in a reverse summoning. He looked and saw the only different thing about him was the giant cleaver on his back and the cold eyes that were slowly becoming warm seeing his sister, but nothing else out of the ordinary. Mito looked up to see the sound of poofing to see her beloved Oni Ice, and she smiled cheerfully as her eyes lit up. As Naruto looked at Jiraiya, he felt a red blur tackle into his chest, making him stumble back a bit before falling on the ground. He rubbed his head a bit before blinking. He looked downward to see Mito staring at him with her big violet orbs which glistened with tears. He smiled as he wiped away the oncoming tears and eyes. "What's wrong, Naruto-chan?" he said in a soothing tone. She visibly relaxed at her brother's touch and voice. She always did. As she grew up, his voice was the thing that always made her feel safe and relaxed. She pushed her face into his chest as she spoke. "I thought you were gonna be hurt again," she said, sniffling a little, since on the inside, as her Kyofu took her away, was deathly worried for her brother, and seeing him now healthy with not a scratch on him made her feel safe again. Naruto just blinked before grinning a devilish grin. He snaked his hands to her sides before tickling her, making her burst out into giggles as she rolled off of him. "Haha, how's that, Mito-chan? This is for believing I wouldn't get back injured," he said as he continued his torture on his poor little sister. He stopped a few minutes later before picking up Mito, who was blue in the face from the lack of air, and sat her on his lap like he used to when she was a little girl. He looked at Jiraiya and she leaned into her brother's warmth. Her head was popped up on his chest where she was facing Jiraiya as well. Jiraiya watched them with a smile on his face, as the two actually reminded him of Minato and Kushina when they were younger, but he shook his head before speaking. "So how did it go?" he said. "They were stopped, like I said, nothing else to it, Kyofu," he said, hiding how he destroyed a quarter of the village itself. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes on Naruto. He was hiding something and knew it would either be bad or good. He didn't know, cause at the moment he just needed more answers. "I see. Well, what will you do in Konoha? Because of your actions it will be regarded back on Konoha, seeing as they have someone like you able to destroy armies like that with little effort like your Tusan. Then things will be tense with the countries." Naruto nodded as he ran a hand through Mito's hair. "I know this, but that won't deter me from protecting my precious people, Kyofu, and you know this better than anyone," he said. Jiraiya grinned warmly before walking over to his godchildren and gave them a hug. "Yeah, and I have to say I'm proud of both you, the way you're both turning out in life, and both your Ka-san and Tusan would be proud as well," he said. Naruto nodded before he looked down and saw Mito asleep in his lap with her arms wrapped around him and head buried in his chest. He blinked before picking her up gently in his arms and stood up. He shifted her in a bridal carry with her head leaning onto him. He kissed her forehead once more before he looked at his Kyofu with a serious eye. "Kyofu, let's go back to Konoha. I'm sure they're looking for results, though I'm sure most already know by now," he said. "Yeah, you're probably right though. Sarutobi might be pissed after what you did," he said. "Like I care what the old fool thinks. He has no say in what I do or who I protect. I'm sorry, Kyofu, but the man to me is nothing more than old fool that thinks he can control me," he said. Jiraiya nodded sadly, knowing his godson was right. Sarutobi had tried for years to either control Naruto or take Mito away from him. "Now let's go," he said before muttering a small Shokin Ribesu before disappearing in a puff of smoke, as did Jiraiya. Konohagakure. When news had spread of what was going on and exactly who was sent to counter Iwa's invading force, the shinobi of Konoha were skeptic if Naruto would be able to do what his father was able to do, as well as a few civilians that got along with him and Mito. That's when news had traveled of Iwa's invading 3 battalions completely massacred with no survivors. This got cheers from all the shinobi, knowing if it wasn't for Naruto they would have lost. They all knew they were still weak from the Third Shinobi War, and added with Kyuubi's attack made it all the worse for him. But thanks to Naruto, the newly and highly respected captain commander of the Umbu Corps was able to put an end to it. What was more shocking was IWA, the village itself being attacked with over a quarter itself being obliterated, and the Kage Tower along with it. This had served as a warning to IWA to not try attacking again of petty reasons. They only hoped Naruto would come back soon. Sarutobi, though, was sweating bullets to do what Naruto did, was completely amazing, something that was only told in war stories when Minato completely decimated a battalion of IWA Nin in 1 minute flat. What Naruto did was going to be told in legends to come for being a man wiping out not 1 or 2 but 3 battalions of Iwa's finest, ranging from Chunin, Elite Jounin, and ANBU. And add the fact he destroyed a quarter of IWA was telling him there was more to Naruto than he or anyone else knew. Naruto's squad that was on frontline guard duty heard the news the first though, and had funny reactions. Even though they all knew Naruto was strong, they never expected him to not only destroy 3 battalions of IWA Nin, but also destroy a quarter of IWA itself. Yeah, they were definitely not gonna underestimate Naruto again. Itachi just smiled, knowing his brother figure / best friend had done something legendary and saved Konoha from imminent destruction. The said squad who were at the gates suddenly saw 2 figures appeared a few yards away from the main gate. When they sensed out who they were, they completely left their posts and Shushin to them. As Naruto walked with Mito in his arms sleeping peacefully with Jiraiya beside them, they felt three presences heading their way and smiled when they knew who it was. They all appeared in front of them before Hana and Yugao surrounded Naruto checking for injuries as Itachi just walked up to him and pat his shoulder. "Welcome back, Naruto-senpai," he said. Naruto smiled as Hana and Yugao stopped fussing over him before giving him a hug. No one noticed Itachi's slight twitch at the scene. That was before they jumped back hiding their blush. Naruto just blinked olishly before he smiled. He checked to see Mito still asleep in his arms. He looked up at his squad and announced IWA is officially surrendered. They have been crippled and cannot even put up a defensive. So there's no more to worry about for a long time, so let's go home, guys, he said, which they all noted at. With that they all walked back to Konoha awaiting what the future would bring them. It's been 3 days since the invading force of IWA was stopped and slaughtered, as well as IWA having a quarter of it being destroyed. This had also set events to happen. The survivors that seen what Naruto did had put him in the IWA bingo book as one of the most dangerous men in the shinobi nations. Kumo's Reikage was excited to see Minato's and Kushina's son do what he did to IWA, and especially the message he carved in the entrance into Iwa's village. That had set the record of Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze being entered into the bingo book. Suna and the other neighboring villagers were wary of Konoha now since they had someone like him in their ranks. The day Naruto came back to Konoha, he was surrounded by shinobi, all giving him cheers of what he did and civilians bowing in respect despite what he had done in the past, and their past sins against him and his sister. He still saved them from destruction, and they owed him that much. Sandaime, though, when he confronted Naruto about it later that day, earned a glare from Naruto telling the man what he does is not his business since he was the commander of the Umbu Corps. He has special laws made for that position. Of what he does on personal levels is not dictated by the current Kage of Konoha, so the man couldn't do anything about it. The same night Mito never left Naruto's side. She stayed with him every second till it was bedtime, and even then she wanted to be by his side. Him fighting a war must have really worried her. It had been the next day, and he heard bombarding sounds coming from his door that morning, so when he left Mito tucked back in bed he went to open the door only to be bombarded with questions from Enko and Kurenai to see if he was alright. He just waved off their concerns saying he was alright. That seemed to calm them down. On the third day, as he recovered, although he wasn't tired at all, he was called into a council meeting to discuss of what happened, and he wasn't really in the mood. All he really wanted to do was spend time with his Amuto. Was that too much to ask? He still remembers that when he scared the Civilian Council shitless and stopping most of Sarutobi's questions about his weapon. That's right, he now fully let Zangetsu sheath on his back, since for one he wasn't gonna hide his partner anymore. 2. It was intimidating as hell to see him walking down the street with Zangetsu on his back, and 3. It was fun seeing Yugao going gaga over the weapon. Now after 2 weeks things have been going back to normal, except that feeling in his mind was getting stronger with each passing day, and it was starting to worry him, though this didn't deter him from training or helping Mito with her training when she needed it. It also didn't stop him from going back to duty and doing missions with his squad, although he has been seeing Itachi acting strange lately. That was something else. Itachi was hiding something, and being childhood friends for so long it worried him, and he promised himself he would get to the bottom of what was wrong with him. He also strangely kept visiting Mikoto and little Sasuke ever since he heard about Fugaku becoming even more deranged in his clan. He was worried about the two. So when he came to visit, he would talk with Mikoto while teaching Sasuke things he needed to know in the current grade he was in at the academy. This sparked a budding friendship with Mikoto. He always remembered Kasa and being best friends with the woman, and had to say Mikoto was fun being around. And little Sasuke, despite having a similar attitude like Fugaku's, was easy to tease or get him mad. He also spent time with his squad when they weren't on duty, and with Enko and Kurenai as well. Though he was noticing some weird things happening with Mito, she would sometimes always blush when she looked at him, while her eyes were always flashing red a few times when she looked at him, as did a few other women he knew. He may be a genius of a shinobi, but he was dense as ever when it came to women. At the moment we find our blonde hero walking around Umbu HQ after finishing a solo S-rank mission to Kusa country. As he was walking he thought about getting Mito and taking her out to Ichiraku after academy the day was over with. That's when he looked up and saw a sight he thought he would never see. Itachi was waiting at the door with a distressed look on his face while a scroll was tightly gripped in his hands. Naruto frowned, for as long as he knew Itachi he has never seen him look this emotional before. Sure, they made small jokes around each other, but this was different. Something happened. So with speed unrivaled by anyone he appeared beside Itachi, who had yet to even realize his presence. This made him even more worried. Itachi was always the first one to know he appears at team meetings. "Itachi, what's wrong?" he said, worried for his best friend. When he saw Itachi stiffen he knew something was up and decided he would find out what was going. He asked again, "Itachi, turn around and tell me what's wrong?" Naruto said once more. Itachi sighed. He didn't know Naruto was near him till he spoke, but he just came at a very bad time. He had been hiding this for as long as he could and didn't want Naruto to know about it. Seems fate didn't listen. He sighed before turning to Naruto. "Naruto, can we talk in private? There's too many ears," he said, looking around the area. Naruto frowned before nodding. He grabbed onto Itachi's shoulder, and using Shushin, they appeared in the Namikaze compound. When he let go of Itachi's shoulder he made a Kage Bushin and told it to go get Mito. The clone nodded before disappearing. After this, Naruto closed all the blinds and activated silencing seals. After this, he looked at the now nervous Itachi, who was still staring at the scroll in his hands. Itachi, explain to me what's going on, he said with a don't argue with me tone. Itachi flinched before looking Naruto in the eye. Well, if I'm gonna be explaining myself, I'd better do so in my true form, he said, which shocked Naruto. Itachi put his hands up in a hand sign and muttered Kai before a poof of smoke erupted from Itachi's body, covering him completely. Naruto had to shield his eyes before THS smoke dissipated. As it did so, Naruto was beyond shocked. Where once stood his best friend Itachi Uchiha stood a long raven-haired woman in the same clothes Itachi was wearing, only difference it hugged her figure like a second skin, and the chest plate armor didn't hide the perky C-cup breasts showing from her chest. Her heart-shaped face and cold black eyes looked back at him as bangs fell in front of her face. Naruto just blinked, slowly digesting what he was seeing. Basically, it was a clone of Mikoto in his opinion. Said woman looked at the ground. Ayano and Naruto, this is my true form, this is who I really am, said the woman. Naruto just thought about what she said and his eyes went wide in shock, that is until he saw her eyes that held a bit of pleading and acceptance. He mentally cringed. Those kind of eyes always broke him, one of his small weaknesses. He rubbed the back of his head and spoke, so I'm guessing you're actually a female? He said. Yes, she said. Naruto frowned. Why hide it? He said. It was because Fugaku placed the genjutsu on me to look male because he wanted only sons and not a daughter in the family. But Kasen always helped me when I needed emotional support when father became strict on my training. She said. Naruto scowled at this. Fugaku to do such a thing made him want to kill the man. But first. Then why didn't you tell me? I am your best friend, aren't I? Don't you trust me enough to keep this a secret? He said. The woman snapped her head up at him and let tears start to fall from her eyes. I didn't know what you would think of me. I didn't want the only person to bring me out of my cold persona to leave me if he found out the truth, she said as she fell to her knees crying. Naruto was there in an instant, holding her to his chest as he rubbed her back in comforting gestures. He still was trying to wrap it around his mind. His best friend since childhood, the Itachi he grew up with, trained with, did missions with, was actually a female and was actually scared of telling him the truth. He pulled himself back and raised her head by her chin till she was looking him in the eyes. You have nothing to be scared about. I would have accepted you either way. Now why not start telling me your true name, HM? He said. This made her emotions break and wrapped her arms around his head and cried and wailed into his shoulder as he held her. Knowing this might take a while, after she had calmed down a bit, she looked at him and spoke. My true name, the one Kasan gave me, is Hitomi Uchiha Hitomi, she said. Naruto actually grinned. The name fit her perfectly. That's a beautiful name, Hitomi-chan, it fits you. Now Hitomi, I need you to explain what's been bugging you for the past few weeks. He said. Hitomi actually blushed at his compliment before she remembered why she was here. Naruto-kun, it's a long story, but let me start by explaining what my clan has been planning. With that, Hitomi started explaining the Uchiha clan with her father planning a coup d'etat and rebel against Konoha. She told him of how some members of the clan were innocent and didn't even know of the plan. She also explained her situation as a spy for her father in the Umbu. This way she could gather important information and hear on the Hokage's meetings. But she also told him of her undercover status, being a double agent for Sarutobi and the council. She told him of Sarutobi's plan along with the elders to have her slaughter the clan so something like this wouldn't happen again. She even told him when she tried to refuse, Sarutobi threatened her by having Sasuke getting a loyalty seal placed on him and Mikoto used a breeding stock. That's when everything broke. She fell into his arms and cried her eyes out, asking, begging for any kind of help. While she told him all this, Naruto was deathly silent. His bangs covered his eyes, as his grip on Hitomi was tighter, and he kept pulling her closer into him to soothe her as much as he could. When the woman stopped crying, she looked up only to gasp, seeing Naruto's murderous and deadly stone-cold gaze. She could see his eyes changing bit by bit. Naruto grit his teeth before pulling away from Hitomi. He got up and pulled her up as well. Hitomi-chan, you should have told me this before, he said. I didn't know if you would, she said, only to stop when Naruto hugged her as his chin was on her head. Of course I would have. You should have told me everything from the beginning. But I will tell you this, Hitomi-chan, he said, ignoring the fact he added the chan suffix to her name. Though Hitomi did notice and would file it for later. I will help you. Be damned, I become an enemy of Konoha. You and I are friends, the best of friends, you know this. And you should know I'd do anything to help you. Now me and you are going to the Uchiha clan compound and find the ones who are planning this uprising, and the innocent ones will live. I hope you don't have any problems killing your father, do you? He said. She answered with no hesitation, hell no. I'll gladly kill him, she said. Naruto nodded once more before speaking. Good, I want you to give me the names of who the ones are planning the uprising. Also, I'd suggest you put back on your Itachi genjutsu just in case. I'm gonna help you lift this burden and help out your clan. Now once you have killed your father, I want you to get your mother, and if possible Sasuke, and take them at our squad safe house, he said while walking up to his closet. She nodded with his planning and knew the innocent would be safe at the safe house. The seals Naruto emplated in the building wouldn't allow those with evil intentions would be blocked out. That's when she saw Naruto open up the closet to show a bunch of boxes and clothes. She watched curiously when he moved them out of the way and bit his finger, drawing blood. She watched when a white glow erupted from the closet. When it faded, it showed a closet full of scrolls that had kanji for something different. They ranged from weapons, medical herbs and medicine, personal fuinjutsu books and tags, family scrolls and books on Nintai Kenjutsu. She watched in fascination when he practically cleaned out the whole closet and started sealing everyone into his own body. She remembered him making a pocket dimension seal used on the body, but this shocked her. When Naruto sealed the last bit of things he needed, he closed the door and looked at Hitomi and spoke. Now Hitomi, you know the plan. After we kill the ones trying to plan the coup, I'll have you take your Kasen and the ones that are innocent to the safe house. After you do this, activate the seals. Because after this I don't want them to feel what is gonna happen afterwards, he said, looking away from her 1 second before looking back at her. Do you understand? He said. Yes, Naruto-kun, but what about Mito-chan? And the rest of our friends? What will we do? She said, worried about her friends. Naruto just scowled before punching the wall behind him, making a 5-foot crater. This shouldn't be surprising since he had long since passed Tsunade's legendary strength, but the Namikaze compound was made of the thickest stone and improved with defensive seals. So what he basically just did was make a crater of pure chakra enhanced cement and steel. This got a wide-eyed look from Hitomi when she saw Naruto's eyes change once again to those eyes, the ones that showed he was willing to do anything to protect his precious people. I'm gonna do what I should have done a long time ago. Hitomi-chan, I'm gonna usurp the Hokage and take Mito away from here to the Fire Daimyo. When I leave the gate, I'm gonna leave a messenger bird for Yugao, Hana, Anko and Kurenai. They will be the only ones to know what has happened. After this, and I have Mito with me, I want you and your clan to follow me, okay? He said. Mitomi just nodded dumbly, still trying to wrap it around her mind, hearing Naruto going to usurp the Hokage and governing body of Konoha itself. She mentally chuckled. Naruto was always like that. He'd face a village and become its #1 enemy if it means saving a friend in trouble. She stood up and went over to Naruto, and before he could do anything, she did something she had wished to do for a long time. She captured his lips in a passionate lip lock. Naruto went wide-eyed before remembering his first kiss with Megami and did what he did with her. He wrapped his arms around her and leaned deeper into the kiss, making her moan in surprise. He rubbed her back while they went against the wall. They continued this for a minute before breaking apart for air. When they separated, they eyed each other before Hitomi smiled with a small blush on her face. Thank you, Naruto-kun. I just wanted to do that before we went separate ways for now, she said. Naruto just blinked before grinning. Yeah, me too, Hitomi-chan. Who knows, there might be more where that came from, he said with a teasing grin. She blushed bright red before turning around. Now let's go, she mumbled. Naruto smirked before coming up from behind her and hugged her from behind. Very well, Haim, but first let me reinforce some more clones to go help get my sister, he said. Once he did that, he grabbed her in a hug and shushined to the outskirts of the Uchiha complex. 2 hours later, we find Naruto's clones holding Mito Uzumaki Namikaze as they raced through the woods, getting to the outskirts of Konoha. As they did so, Mito was asking why he was doing his and only said they needed to get away from Konoha for good, and that he would explain later. At the Uchiha clan complex, chaos was happening. Itachi and Naruto himself had already infiltrated the clan compound and were assassinating the traitors. They were officially found out, and at the moment was killing off the planning traitors and was sparing the innocent, which had the innocent ones follow Itachi's clone and promised it will be explained later. Naruto dodged a kunai slash before kicking a Uchiha guard into a building and ducked under a Katan jutsu before doing hand signs himself. Katan, Misurufuri Mingudo Reagan, Katan, Dragon Flaming Missile, he stated before blowing a white flaming dragon, incinerating a group of Uchiha shinobi and burying a few buildings along with it. Naruto exhaled before looking at Hitomi's gobsmacked expression. He chuckled before speaking. I had it mastered a bit ago. Anyways, let's get to your house. I have a feeling something bad is happening, he said, which Itachi nodded before they sped through the deserted or destroyed buildings. When they got there, Naruto narrowed his eyes when he heard seeming, so he rushed in, kicking the wall in and finding the source with Itachi following him. When they got there, they saw Fugaku trying to stab Mikoto, which the woman was resisting the best she could despite her being having resistance seals on her. Naruto's blood boiled over and shunpoed between Fugaku and Mikoto and kicking the man through the wall and standing protectively in front of Mikoto. He nodded at Itachi, who nodded back, which she went outside to deal with Fugaku. While that was happening, he looked back at Mikoto and started ripping off the resistance seals on her and helping her stand. And Naruto-kun, what's going on? Why was Fugaku trying to kill me, she said as tears were glistening in her eyes. Naruto just closed his eyes and hugged the woman he had come to see as a very precious person in his life and let her cry in his shoulder. He looked in Itachi's direction to see her standing over the dead body of Fugaku, but seemed to be looking at the other direction. He didn't have time to think about it at the moment as he held Mikoto and helped soothe her as best as he could. With Hitomi, Hitomi had just killed Fugaku with her ninjato before she heard sounds coming from the other side of the room. She looked over her shoulder and inwardly cursed. It was her little brother Sasuke, and with him seeing her over Fugaku's body made it confusing for the child. Nisan, what's going on? That clan has been killed, and that's when realization came up on his face. And why? He said as tears fell from his eyes. Hitomi flinched, which was missed by Sasuke, and decided on another course of action. I was doing this to protect those precious to me, Sasuke, she said in her Itachi genjutsu. Sasuke looked at his Nisan's form in confusion before he saw Hitomi's eyes close before they snapped open, revealing her Sharingan. Hitomi knew what she was doing was risky, but maybe this way she could help her little brother before Konoha could corrupt him. I'm sorry, Sasuke, but I have to go now. As for why I did this, it's like I said, it was because I wanted to protect those important to me, That included you as well. Goodbye, baby brother, she said before her Sharingan morphed into a three-pronged shuriken and said, Manjikyu. Tsukiyomi, she said. That was when Sasuke fell unconscious with a gift from his Nii-san to secretly protect him later on. With Naruto, he pulled away from her and spoke, Mikoto-san, we have to get you out of here. I promise everything will be explained soon. But there is something rotten happening in Konoha and I intend to find out, so please do me this favor and follow Itachi when he asks you to. He said. He started walking out of the hole in the wall. Mikoto watched her best friend's son and her personal friend walk out after protecting her from getting killed. She calmed herself and saw Itachi come back in with a sad frown on his face. Kao-san, it's time we go, but first puts his hand in a tiger seal kai. Before she changed back to her real form, shocking and making Mikoto smile happily. Hitomi smiled as she hugged her Kao-san. Kao-san, we have to go. Naruto-kun has helped me get the innocents of the Uchiha clan away. We need to get to them and fast, she said, surprising Mikoto once more before she started grinning. So it's Naruto-kun now, huh? She said. Hitomi just blushed and looked away from her as Mikoto was laughing at her daughter's expense. Naruto himself had already shunpoed to the ANBU HQ and demanded for the guards to drag every single council member to the chambers on the law of the captain commander himself, ordering this. They quickly saluted, not wanting to be in Naruto's line of wrath. When the council members of all kinds were summoned, from all the civilians to the clan heads and elders, even Sarutobi himself, were dragged by the Umbu and told to come, for it was an emergency. When they asked why they only got it, was Naruto Commander's order, which made them all think what was going on. Why has that brat called us here for so late in the night? Said a pink-haired councilwoman. I agree, what is so damn important that he'd have his own Umbu drag us from our home to come here? Said another civiline. The clan heads though were mentally frowning, wondering what was going to have a meeting ordered by Naruto himself. And it never happened since he hated the meetings. It's because I have important business with some people in this very room and you're all here to witness what I mean, said Naruto as he appeared from the maid. Everyone jumped, not even sensing him there, while Sarutobi, the elders and civilians glared at him. Why have you called this meeting, boy? Some of us have better things to do. Naruto just throwed a glance at the man before ignoring him completely as he pulled out a folder from his coat. This is the reason I brought you all here. It would seem there was some Uchiha in the clan planning a coup, he said, and raising his hand, silencing the incoming questions. He then spoke once more. Also, this folder here is a personal file on my squad member Weasel, aka Itachi Uchiha, and from what I can see there is top secret information of him being a spy for the Uchiha clan. He said, gaining even more gasps and narrowed eyes from Sarutobi and the elders. But that's not the real reason I brought you here. You see, you Sarutobi and you honorable elders of the Shinobi Council have made him an undercover spy to be placed as a double agent in the clan, and also have ordered for him to slaughter his clan that also has innocents within that know nothing of the plans some others were making. He said. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes at Naruto while the elders did the same, while the clan heads were inwardly trying to figure where this was going. So I say right now, what gave you the fucking right to order one of my subordinates? Even if you're the fucking Hokage, you have no jurisdiction with my squad, Hiruzen Sarutobi. And even more so, you threatened my subordinate with his family if he didn't do as you ordered. So I'm gonna give you one chance to explain yourself, Sarutobi. One chance is all you're gonna get, he said. The clan heads were gawking before some growled at Sarutobi. She always knew something was fishy about the man, but with this recent information tipped the scales. Sarutobi was thinking a mile a minute on what to do before going with an alternative. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, you dare order me, the Hokage of Konohagakure, and dare threaten me? Would you risk your life like this to get information? He said. Naruto glared at the man. Hell yes, you old bag of fucking bones, he said with venom dripping from each word. Sarutobi then smirked and decided to play his ace. But what about Mito? Are you willing to risk her life? He said, getting shocked looks from them all. Naruto was deathly silent after that before an unmeasurable force slammed in the chambers, crushing the floor. The civilians didn't stand a chance and was slammed into the floor. The clan heads had more resistance, but had to hold on to their desks from falling to their knees, though Sarutobi had the worst of it since it was all aimed at him. He was on his knees gasping for breath. He looked at Naruto to see a menacing ghostly figure holding a scythe hovering over him as Naruto was glaring at him with his now eyes changed from the ice-cold blue to the black eyes with the golden pupils. They held so much anger and hate it was suffocating. Naruto raised his right hand as Zangetsu appeared in his hand and pointed it at Sarutobi. If you so much as try anything to hurt her to get to me, I will make what I did in IWA and Kyuubi's attack look like a children's fight compared to what I would do to you and Konoha as a whole, he said with a much defiant voice than before. He then glared. Now that you have spoken, I will leave you with this threat, Hiruzen Sarutobi. If you so much as try anything that I find out is not right in my book, I will do something far worse for your village and release all the secrets I know of in Konoha, from the defensive mechanisms that protect our walls to the Fuin barrier that surrounds Konoha, everything to even its dark little secrets, he said. This made Sarutobi go pale and nod before the pressure let up completely. When they looked up, they didn't see Naruto anywhere, but they could still hear his voice. Always remember, Sarutobi, I'm always watching you and I'll be there when you fuck up, and I'll be the one to send you to the Shinigami along with your teammates, he said before the voice faded away. This event had marked a major shift in Konoha as the day one Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze became its #1 enemy and missing Nin. With Naruto, we find him already outside the Konoha Gatisas. He headed for the safe houses. As he did so, he sent 4 Kaigabushins hanged into messenger birds to relay the information, and for them not to do anything until they got another message from him again. 5 minutes later, using Shunpa, he arrived at the safe house to see its security seals activated and the occupants safe and sound inside. He could also sense Mito in there as well, with Hitomi and Makoto around her. He sighed before walking up to the doors and activating a blood seal to unlock the security seals as to not set the alarm off. As he got inside, he locked it back and turned around to see the Uchiha survivors looking at him with understanding eyes. Mitomi must have explained while he was out. He nodded at them as he walked up the steps to talk to Hitomi and Makoto, and also to check up on Mito. When he got to the second floor, he saw a few Uchiha shinobi that weren't involved with the traitors guarding the door. Once they saw him, though, they saluted before opening the door. He smiled at them before walking through as the doors closed behind him, ending with a click. Once inside, he was on the receiving end of getting tackled by a red missile, knocking him back a few steps. He looked down to see Mito smiling at him. He smirked before looking out to see Hitomi in her true form and Makoto smiling at him. He smiled back as he picked up Mito and set her on his shoulder, only for her to stay put. He sighed before setting her in his arms in a bridal carry as she cuddled into his chest. Naruto rolled his eyes with a gentle smile. Mito was always clingy when it came to him. He kept walking as Mito snuggled closer into him and spoke. "So I'm guessing you told the others of the situation?" he said, gesturing to Hitomi. Said now revealed female Uchiha smiled. "Yeah, though it was surprising when a few said they had suspected something, but couldn't get any real evidence," she said. "And have you told," pointing at Mito, "about anything else?" he said. Hitomi nodded. "Just a small portion, but what I don't get is what we're going to do next," she said with a frown. Naruto just grinned. "I have an idea. Just have the survivors get ready. We're leaving in about 10 minutes. Naruto said while shifting Mito so her head was resting in the crook of his neck as he walked to the window looking out in the forests of Fire Country. Hitomi nodded before walking out to address the survivors of their next move. Makoto though stayed and walked up beside him as she looked at him with a gentle smile. "You know, Naruto-kun, you remind me so much of your father and mother, it's remarkable," she said. Naruto smiled. "Yeah, though honestly I think I take more after Two-san, but got the short anger fuse from Ka-san. Especially when it comes to council meetings," he said with a frown. Makoto just laughed. "True, Kushina wasn't one for politics, but could make them shut up when they needed to, and I can see you got your father's and physical appearance and skills," she said with a little humor in her voice. Naruto just grinned. "Yeah, but I think Mito-chan here is just like mom in everything from the tomboyish attitude to the talent in Fuinjutsu," he said as his eyes softly settled on Mito as he pat her head, causing the little girl snuggle closer into him. Makoto blinked and smiled at the scene. "Naruto-kun, you really love her, don't you?" she said. Which Naruto just looked at Makoto softly. "Yes, I love her more than anyone could imagine and would protect her to my dying breath, just like you, Hitomi, Kyofu, and all my other precious people. That was the promise I made when I died," he said with the last part quietly, but Makoto caught it. But before she could question him, Hitomi came back in. "Naruto-kun, everyone is ready, it's time to go," she said. Naruto just turned around and nodded and walked to the door with Makoto eyeing him strangely. She still couldn't get out what he said out of her mind. Now she knew there was more to Naruto than she or anyone else even knew. She then decided she would find out what he meant later on. Naruto walked out the door before he remembered something and looked at Hitomi. "Hitomi-chan, where is Sasuke?" he said. Hitomi just closed her eyes. "I decided to leave Sasuke behind. I explained this to Ka-san and agreed. I have a plan that has a risk of a 50-50 chance in the future to work. Until then we'll have to wait till then," she said. Naruto just closed his eyes, remembering Sasuke when he was growing up, and decided he would keep an eye on him to make sure he was okay. He opened his eyes very well. "Then as you're still acting commander, I am gonna keep an eye out on Sasuke if he's ever in trouble or decides to take the wrong path. I'll straighten him out for you," he said with a grin. This made Hitomi as well as Makoto go wide-eyed before they smiled and nodded. "Arigato, Naruto-kun," they both said in unison, which was pretty funny seeing they looked like clones of one another. Naruto just smiled and waved them off. "It's alright, but right now we have to get moving," he said as he walked out the door with the two following him. Makoto wondering where they were going. "Where will we be going, Naruto-kun?" she said. Hitomi raised an eyebrow. She too wanted to know, but she was more curious at how her mother was exclaiming his name in such an affectionate manner. Naruto just kept walked as he held Mito. "Where we are going is the one place I know you all will be safe. It's the one place Konoha can't touch you. We're going to the heart of Fire Country. We're going to Haishur, the capital city of Haino Kuni," Naruto said. This made them gasp. They were going to the Fire Daimyo's city? The very place that was built even before Konoha? Sure, they had been around the area on missions, but never before inside the city. Naruto somehow knowing their thoughts. "Don't worry, we'll be let in. I know the Fire Daimyo, and he's a personal friend of my father's and myself as well. Even if the man is a lord of a country, he will not deny help from me since I've helped him out before and saved his family from assassination once or twice," he said, shocking them even more. Naruto then looked at Mito before patting her head as he softly spoke. "No matter how long I have to, I will always protect you through life or death. I shall stick to my promise and always protect you," Naruto said. He inwardly didn't know why he said that, but it's just something within him demanded him to say it. He shook his head as he was followed by a smiling Mikoto and Hitomi. Haishire Gates. At the gates of Haishire, we find Naruto with Mikoto and Hitomi on both his sides while Mito was on walking beside Naruto holding his hand with the last remaining Uchihas following them. When they finally reached the gates, they were surrounded by the guards. They were samurai, the personal army of any daimyo. They were the security force and police force of each capital city in every country. As everyone was tense, Naruto was just staring at them with an impassive face. That is until they heard a voice from the samurai. "And Naruto Dano?" said a male voice. "Captain?" said a samurai. The samurai were looking at their captain who was walking past them toward Naruto before he bowed, surprising them all. Naruto just smiled at the man who was wearing the standard samurai armor, except he wore a captain's badge for Squad 3. The man had messy brown hair and gray-black eyes. He wore a katana at his hip and a small dagger attached to his back with the handle facing his right so it would be an easy quick draw. "It's good to see you, Nokura," Naruto said. The newly named Nokura stood up and smiled at the man before him. "As it is to me, Naruto, what have you come here for?" he said, eyeing the people with him. Naruto frowned and spoke. "That will have to be spoken with Aizo-sama," he said, which got a frown from Nokura and nodded. "Then follow me, you all back to your posts, nothing to see here," he said, making the samurai head back to their positions. Nokura then looked back and said, "Now if you will all follow me, we will head to see Aizo-sama," he said, getting a nod from Naruto. Mito, who was watching curiously, looked up at Naruto and asked the question on all their minds. "Ano, Naruto and I, who is Aizo?" she said with her face scrunched up cutely, making her look like a confused fox. Naruto just smiled as he ruffled Mito's hair, making her pout as a tint of pink rose up on her face. "Why, he's the fire daimyo of Haino Kuni," he said in a nonchalant manner, although inwardly he was grinning like a madman. This got gaping looks from everyone as he walked on with a confused Mito as to who the fire daimyo was. Fire Parisa throne room entrance. Naruto with Mito followed by Mikoto and Hitomi. They had left the remaining in another room so they could rest after the long journey. As they left them, they had followed Nokura, as Naruto had yet to say a word, only to speak when asked a question from Mito. When they reached the throne room doors, Nokura turned around and smiled. "Aizo-sama, we'll be expecting you, Naruto Dano, so please go on ahead," he said before the giant doors opened up slowly to reveal a room twice the size of the Hokage's office. The room itself had paintings of the previous daimyos along with their accomplishments listed below. Ahead of the group was a small red carpet leading to a throne with a person sitting in it. This person was wearing elegant and formal clothing. He had black hair with some gray could be seen, showing he was middle-aged. The man had brown sharp eyes that showed wisdom and a feeling of commandance. This man was Iroh Mizaki, current fire daimyo of Haino Kuni and lord of Fire Country. The man smiled brightly when he saw Naruto and speaks. "Welcome, Naruto, how long has it been?" he said. The Fire Lord of Fire Country, Iroh Mizaki, was staring at the man in front of him. He had just been told of someone wanting to speak with him, but had at first declined, saying he was spending time with his family. Though things changed when the messenger said it was urgent and spoke exactly who it was. That made him leave in a hurry. So imagine his surprise when he is informed of a group of Uchiha and its matriarch along with Naruto's little sister that he has helped protected from Sarutobi's attempts. That made him mentally scowl. That man had lost his respect long ago. He shook his head before speaking. "Hello, Naruto-san, it's good to see you in good health. Now I am glad to see you and all, but I have to ask, what is so urgent to come here personally to speak with me?" Iroh said, wondering what his friend needed to speak about that was so urgent to not even relay a message ahead of time. Naruto frowned before looking at Mito. "Mito-chan, go to Mikoto-san and stay with her and Hitomi-chan, while I speak with Iroh-sama, okay?" he said with a reassuring smile. Mito was about to disagree when she saw him reassure her, so she walked over to Mikoto and Hitomi before turning her head to see Naruto nodding for her to go on ahead. She smiled before walking with Mikoto holding her hand as they walked out the door. Hitomi though was hesitant as she looked at Naruto, worried until he spoke. "Hitomi-chan, don't worry, everything will be fine. Remember what I told you. I would do anything I had to protect you, Mikoto, and anyone else that is important to me, so go on ahead. Iroh-sama have things to speak about," he said. Hitomi stayed there for a few seconds before smiling and went out the door, giving Naruto one last glance as the doors closed. After they did so, a tense silence followed as Naruto looked back into a piercing brown eyes as Iroh stared back into cold icy blue eyes. They stayed like that until Iroh broke the tension. "Naruto, what is the reason you called this meeting? Has something happened?" he said, needing to know what has been going on to make his friend and be so serious. Yeah, Naruto usually is serious all the time, but at the moment he was seeing something in Naruto's he hasn't ever seen before. Naruto just remained impassive before speaking. "What I'm doing here, Iroh-sama, is that something happened in Konoha that has made take the alternative path I once told you about," he said, making Iroh's eyes widen slightly. Naruto continued, "Despite this, you see, I won't lie to you, ever since the past declaration of war from IWA and its decimation, Konoha's higher-ups have been on my back for some time now. But that wasn't really that bad. That is until they crossed the line with one of my subordinates," he said with a cold-edged tone in his voice. Iroh frowned at this. He remembers the declaration on Konoha from IWA, and the daimyo of Earth Country had not known until it was too late. Despite that, though, it stopped when news of Naruto's deeds of decimating the invading force and of his action with destroying part of Iwagakure itself. Still, Inoki the Tsuchikage had survived that. Whatever destroyed the tower at the time surrendered, and to make that man surrender was in itself was almost impossible to do. That's when he analyzed the rest of what Naruto said and spoke. What did they do, Naruto? Was it so bad to make you leave Konoha along with the Uchiha matriarch and some of the clan's members as well? He said. Naruto just stiffly nodded before speaking. Yes, sir. Now I'm gonna explain to you all that's happened in the past few hours regarding of what's happened and of the current situation, Naruto said. Iroh nodded before Naruto started explaining of what Hitomi passed on to him. First he told him of Itachi's true gender and name, and what a few in the Uchiha were planning, Hitomi's position of being their spy within the Anbu ranks, also of Sarutobi and the elders' order to have Hitomi be an undercover double agent within the Uchiha clan. He also told him of the threat he gave to Hitomi if she didn't do as they asked when they ordered for the Uchiha clan as a whole to be slaughtered. He also spoke of when he came and helped her with the finding the true traitors of the clan and helped assassinate them before sparing the innocent. He spoke of them saving Mikoto from Fugaku trying to kill her. After this he told Iroh of his summoning with the governing body of Konoha. He told Iroh of his argument with Sarutobi, and with his order to the old man to give him the information he needed. That's when he lastly spoke of Sarutobi's threat of to have Mito killed to subjugate Naruto's will. He then explained the rest of him leaving behind a scared council and amused clan heads of his long-time last words to most of them. If they ever stepped in the wrong territory he'd be back to kill them. Iroh took all this in stride before he snarled in rage. I warned him. I warned that old fool. If he crossed the line with me, him and Konoha would pay. Iroh yelled. He closed his eyes trying to calm down after hearing everything, especially about Sarutobi's threat with Mito's life, and having the man order such a thing with Uchiha clan made his blood boil. He took a calming breath before opening his eyes before he looked in Naruto's direction. Don't worry, Sarutobi will pay for what he has done. Konoha will suffer for the leader's ignorance and foul leadership. Now while I deal with them, is there anything you need, Naruto? He said, after seeing the hesitant look appear on his face. Naruto looked at the ground as thought about what he was gonna ask of the man in front of him. That's when he steeled his eyes and looked at Iroh. Iroh-sama, I ask no beg you, he said before kneeling in front of the shocked man, since he knew Naruto never bowed to anyone. Naruto bowed his head till it touched the stone floor he was on. I beg you, can the Uchiha survivors along with Mikoto-san stay here? And be protected within your walls? I don't know any other place than under your protection they would be safe, he said. Iroh just blinked as his shock rapidly disappeared with amusement filling his body. He stood up and walked over to Naruto's kneeling body. He bent down and pulled on his arm to make him stand. Naruto, you don't have to beg, it's not in your nature to do such a thing. Besides, he said with a grin that looked unnatural on a daimyo's regal face, of course they can stay, they will be put under my protection and kept safe from Konoha and especially Sarutobi and his teammates' clutches, he said. The avatar of death just smiled before straightening himself out. Iroh wasn't done though. But what will you do, Naruto? With Hitomi and Mito, where will you go? I mean, you are always welcomed here, but I'm sure you have something planned out, don't you? He said with a grin. His response was something he didn't expect. I know of one place where me and Mito will be welcomed, and that place is Kumo. The current Raikage was friends with my parents, and would be the perfect place to help train Mito and myself. As for Hitomi, she has informed me that she will be going undercover in Jiraiya's spy network and join a secret uprising organization called Akatsuki. She will be seen as Itachi in the organization and in public until we can find a way to find out their objective and who their leader is, he said. Iroh nodded with the plan. It was foolproof. He too had heard about to now growing in fame Akatsuki, and had recently been hearing rumors the group across the elemental nations. He then remembered something he had been wishing to speak to Naruto about for a while now. Naruto, I agree with your plan, but there is something we need to speak about. Since you're no longer a shinobi of Konoha and will most likely be put in the Konoha bingo book, what will you do? Someone of your old position and abilities will not be ignored in the elemental nations, he said. Naruto just frowned and thought about it. What will he do? Surely IWA will send assassins after him, and Konoha's Hunter Nin will be hot on his trail even if he's in Kumo. He closed his eyes thinking on what he should do. Iroh saw this and spoke. I know of a way, and honestly I've been thinking on this. I can place you in that will define your skills, he said with a slight grin. Said Exumbu. Captain Commander blinked and looked at Iroh with curious eyes. What would that be, Izo-sama? He said. If anything, Iroh's grin got wider before he spoke. Since you, Naruto, and your family have been friends with my family for so long, and you are highly respected among all fire guardians and basically my personal samurai, I would like to officially award you the position among my troops, he said. Naruto gaped as his jaw fell to the ground. Him? Being officially placed in the Fire Daimyo's army? He gulped audibly as he spoke. And what position would that be? He said. Iroh just gained a shark-like grin, making Naruto break out in a cold sweat, something that he rarely does. The leader of the Fire Guardians, the personal commander of my whole army, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I would like to make you the first ever Kasai Raida Sotecho, Fire Leader Captain Commander. Iroh said, his grin gone at the end, replaced with total and utter seriousness engraved on his face. Naruto gasped as he just thought about what Izo just said. Him, the leader of the Fire Guardians? The very same ones he was respected by for protecting them and the daimyos in his time as Umbuso Teicho, Captain Commander, personal commander of his whole army? Something like that kind of position has never been called in history. He thought about it and looked into his friend's eyes. Iroh-sama, I humbly respect your decision, but I'm afraid I'm not fit, or even strong enough to be in that position. What I've done over the years, the people I've killed, he said. Iroh just looked at Naruto with eyes that said, are you a baka? Before he spoke, Naruto, you say you're not fit for the position? Have I ever told you your father and mother, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, are the ones that helped me come up with the idea? They once spoke about actually having you their own son in this position if Konoha had gotten out of hand, in which case it did. They are the ones who left that position which specifically for you, Naruto. As for not being strong enough, you can't be serious. You are already recorded in history books for decimating over 3 battalions from IWA, and also your attack of Iwagakure itself. He said. Naruto's eyes shot wide open. The position he was being offered was one his own parents helped the daimyo create, and had actually hoped he'd be the one to succeed the position? Plus, getting talked about his achievements in the IWA massacre made him feel slightly embarrassed. That's when Mito flashed through his mind, and he decided right then and there what he would do. He raised his head up to Iroh and said, Iroh-sama, I regret what I said and would accept your offer only if you give me time to help train Mito and myself. I can honestly say I'll be ready to succeed the position in a few years to come. Until then, you can give me missions to other daimyos and village leaders if it will help out Haino Kuni, he said with confidence and determination coming off him like the flaming sun. Iroh just smiled and spoke, Very well, then I accept your proposal. During the time you're in Kumo, I'll send in missions transferred from me to the Kaminari daimyo, Lightning daimyo. He then will have them delivered to the Reikage for you to take upon yourself. As this goes on, I will be expecting you to get stronger so you can fill in that position. As for your sister, your mother had asked me to make the position for her when she was strong enough to claim it. Train her till she's strong enough, Naruto, he said. Naruto just smirked. Very well, Iroh-sama. I'll see to it Mito-chan is strong enough to give any Kage a run for their money or beat them in the future. As for myself, I promise I'll get stronger to make my parents proud and take the position they helped create, and to protect those important to me, Naruto said as he eyes just told Iroh he was speaking to damn honest truth, and would do what he said. Good, now get going, and as promised I'll have the Uchiha survivors along with Mikoto Uchiha be put under protection and can place their clan within my walls so they won't have to worry about the threats outside, he said. Naruto nodded. Yes, thank you again, Iroh-sama. Now by your leave, he said in his professional tone. Iroh nodded before speaking. You're dismissed, and Naruto, he said. Naruto looked over his shoulder to see Iroh smiling at him. Be careful out there, don't want my finest warrior dying out there, the fire daimyo said. The secret avatar just smirked and nodded before walking out the door as it closed behind him. While Iroh watched him leave, he thought about the future. That boy, he's gonna be someone very important in the future even now with his new responsibility. I can already tell the fates are in his hands and will be the one help turn this war-torn world into a peaceful land. Him and Mito will both be legends as they grow up and get stronger and wiser. I can only hope I can be there to see it happen. With that, Iroh Mizaki left to go prepare his punishment on Konoha for what they have done, and show them who truly rules Fire Country. With Naruto. After Naruto walked out of the throne room, he was told by the guard that they were escorted to the room with the survivors. So with that, he shunpoed to get to the others to relieve them the news. When he got there, he opened the doors to see the Uchiha occupants resting from the long journey from Konoha. As he looked around, he sees Hitomi and Mikoto with Mito asleep on a handmade futon. He walked over to them before making his presence known. Hey, Hitomi-chan, Mikoto-chan. Just got done talking with daimyo-sama, he said, ignoring the fact he added chan at the end of Mikoto's name, though Mikoto did notice and like Hitomi filed it for later. How did it go? Hitomi said, needing to know what's gonna happen with the rest of her clan and her Kasan. Naruto just smiled before speaking. I have gained your clan's entrance, and are able to live within the walls of the city. Also the clan is under the protection of the daimyo, included with the whole of his personal samurai and fire guardians, he said, gaining shocked looks from Hitomi and Mikoto along with some spectators that were listening to the conversation. Really? We'll be able to live here free from the outside dangers and of Konoha? Said a teary-eyed Mikoto. Naruto just nodded before he was pulled into a hug from a rather joyous Mikoto. He looked at Hitomi to see a tear fall from her face, showing she had not expected this to really happen. He mentally grinned since he always could do the impossible. That's when Hitomi remembers the situation in Konoha. What about Konoha? I'm pretty sure they try something even with daimyo protecting them, she said, but was cut off when Naruto's face had a shark-like grin come up on his face, making the two a bit nervous. Ho, not need to worry about them. Daimyo-sama has personally said it was high time they learned exactly who was in charge of Haino Kuni, and was going there himself along with his personal samurai to deal with them, he said before he chuckled in a cold and dangerous tone. The two went wide-eyed. The daimyo himself was heading to Konoha? They to grin, thinking of how some were gonna react to that. Naruto continued, he should be heading there the same time me and Mito head out as well. Now while this is happening, Hitomi-chan, be sure that if you get in trouble you signal me the way I told you, alright? He said, earning a nod from Hitomi. Naruto smiled before looking at the confused Mikoto. he reached into his pouch and pulled out a tri-pronged kunai. This got an audible gasp from Mikoto, since anyone would recognize that kunai. Naruto grabs Mikoto's hand and places the kunai in her hands, then closes it open before looking into her amazed yet confused eyes. Mikoto-chan, just like Hitomi-chan, this kunai will lead me back to you. If you are in ever need of help, just throw that kunai and I'll be there. I have a special seal placed on it so that if you are in danger it will send a message back to me before I flash back to you, so use it when you need to, okay? He said with a gentle smile. Mikoto looks at the kunai in her hand back to Naruto with wide eyes before looking back at it again. She couldn't get it out of her head to be given such a responsibility, to be given the kunai that in history brought her friend Minato the name Konoha's Kiroi Senko, Yellow Flash. So she did the only thing she could logically think of at that exact moment. She walked closer to Naruto till she was practically smashing her body with her own, and gave him a peck on the lips before moving away, hiding her blush. Hitomi's eyes shot wide open before looking into Mikoto's eyes to see an emotion she knew all too well: love and gratitude. For the one person to help her when she needed it the most, she honestly didn't know what to think at the moment except replaying what she just saw over and over again. Her Ka-san kissed Naruto on the lips. She looked to see a shocked Naruto touching his lips as his eyes were wide open in surprise. She sighed as she remembered all the times Naruto would come over. She had seen the times her Ka-san would look at him when he wasn't looking, but had shrugged it off, not thinking it was important. But now she knew it meant something if what just happened was anything to go by. Naruto meanwhile was replaying what just happened in his head. Before he looked in Mikoto's direction, that's when he saw the tiny blush on her face. He mentally sighed. That was the third time he was kissed by a different woman. Now he may act like a dense fool around women, but he knows when one is interested in him, and right now he doesn't know much on Megami since it had been when he was 5 years old, and he had yet to talk to her since then. Then there was Hitomi, his recently revealed best friend. He honestly could say he had something for her, but didn't know as of yet. For Mikoto, she was his Ka-san's best friend when they grew up, and the times of him visiting her flashed back into his head, the times he helped her when she needed it, watching over Sasuke when Fugaku was too induced in the clan to even care. That's also when his friends in Konoha came to his mind: Yugao, Hana, Anko, and lastly Kurenai. Kami. How many women did he care for in that way? He was confused about this. That's when strangely Mito flashed in his mind, but she was his sister for Kami's sake. How could he have feelings for her as well? Sure, he loved her with all his heart, but did he love her more than a brother should? He didn't know and shook his head before getting control over himself. He'd think on it later on. Well, Hitomi-chan, we have to get some sleep for tomorrow, and Mikoto-chan, Demiyo-sama has assigned rooms for everyone in the palace till he can sort out a plot of land for the clan compound to be newly made. Naruto said, getting a slow nod from Mikoto since she was still getting over what she just did. Naruto smiled before going over the Mito's sleeping form and picked her up gently as to not wake her. After this he shifted her body till she had her head on his shoulder with her arms wrapped around his neck. He nodded at the two women before walking out the door. After this, Mikoto had assembled the Uchiha occupants and announced what the current situation on what was going to happen. That's when Naruto gained the eternal respect of the clan for helping them survive a full-out slaughter and bringing them to a new home. Hitomi watched this with a smile on her face before she too left to her assigned room. As she did, she thought about the future ahead of them all. Naruto and Mito's room. Once Naruto was inside their room, he had gently set Mito on her futon, but took a little trouble to have her let go of him. He then started grabbing his scrolls and setting them down on the table before he placing Zangetsu beside his own futon that was beside Mito's own, after which he sighed before getting out of his clothes, though he never saw Mito slightly wake up, so when he was taking off his black long-sleeved shirt he never saw her face light up like the sun and jump under the covers. Kyubi, who watched the scene, couldn't get the picture of Naruto's muscular chest out of her head, and when she saw her container's reaction she decided to tease her. Wow, never knew Naruto-kun was that muscular under all those clothes of his. Was that a six-pack? I wonder. Oh my Mito-chan, are you having pervy thoughts? Kyubi said. This got the immediate reaction out of the now wide-awake girl since she blushed even harder, making her long red hair pale in comparison. Q-chan, I wasn't. Don't deny it, Mito-chan. I saw the way you looked at him, if only for a split second, but I saw it. You like him, don't you? Kyubi said, putting the emphasis on like. This made Mito bury her head even deeper into her pillow, trying to think up an excuse to counter what Kyubi said. Well, I know you like him too. And don't think I don't know the thoughts running through your head when we see him. I can always hear them, and especially when you're asleep you always mumble things like, oh, Naruto-kun there, or ah, Naruto-kun. So ha, said a mentally grinning Mito. This made Kyubi blush the color of her fur, to think her container knew the things that had been happening with her, and the fantasies she's had for her brother. Yeah, she will admit it, Naruto was someone that had captured her heart, albeit unintentionally, but still he had things other mortals never had. He was strong, confident, loyal to a fault, and protective of his friends. She still remembered the night when he jumped in front of her crazed-induced attack on his mother. That took guts never seen before. No mortal was as strong and yet brave as Naruto, and yes, she also knew of his true power. After all, she was actually a divine entity that has seen the true side of humanity, both good and bad. So it shouldn't have come to a surprise when she felt the feeling of Megami on him. That's when she knew Naruto was far more stronger than anyone knew, and that attracted her to him even more. Well, at least you didn't deny what I said earlier, so you do like him, don't you? She said, questioning her container. I gotta go, she said before cutting off connection. Kyubi still smiled at this. Mito just couldn't see that she loved her brother more than that of a sister should, but keeps her feelings pushed down. She's gonna have to convince her soon that it doesn't matter if he was her brother. Love comes in many ways. She might have not known love, but she knew the way it was. She only hoped that there was a way to get Naruto's love for herself as well. Back in the real world, Mito had opened her eyes to peek over the covers to see Naruto getting into his futon. So when she quickly hid and waited, she had thought about what Kyubi said. Do I really like Naruto and I that way? Mito thought before she heard the sound of breathing. When she looked out of her covers, she saw Naruto already asleep. That's when her eyes started to soften. Although she was still only 10 years old, she had the extraordinary ability to see through people's emotional defenses, and it came very helpful, and could also read people by looking into their eyes. But when it came to Naruto, she always saw past the love he had shown for her as she grew up, that he was tired, exhausted. Even she never knew until a few months ago, but she came to the conclusion he was so tired of watching their backs for enemies or dealing with the stress of fighting the Konoha's governing body. She had truly never seen him sleep and not have a weapon at the ready in case of an attack. But now she could finally see Naruto look more peaceful and less tense than he ever was. When she looked at his face, she was mesmerized by the way he just looked. There wasn't a shred of the scowl when his body was tense and ready for an attack. That's when she saw him starting to shake and scowl even more, so she did the only thing that could come to her mind. She crawled closer to Naruto's body and laid her head on his chest, before wrapping her arms around his body as best as she could. She let her long red hair flow down, covering her body. She then pulled the blankets over them. That's when Naruto's body started to look less tense, and his scowl was replaced with a small smile. She smiled back. Before she felt a pair of arms wrapped around her body, she looked back to see his arms around her back as he pulled her deeper into him, and she welcomed it as she leaned into the crook of his neck, whispering soothing words to help calm him down. It seemed to work, as his trembling completely stopped and was fully relaxed. She felt his heartbeat slow down to the normal pace as well. She smiled as she embraced the warmth of her and Naruto's body. Though secretly Kyubi was too, she wouldn't know that Naruto secretly loved the feeling of warmth cover his body like a blanket as it washed away the nightmares of his sins, and just enjoyed the warm feeling over his body. This was the scene no one would know about, and only shared between these two for the rest of their lives. When morning had come, Naruto was already opening his eyes only to screw them shut, mentally throwing curses at the sun, making Zangetsu secretly amused at that. When he did get used to the sun, blinked the tiredness out of his eyes before trying to get up, only to feel a weight on his body. He quickly looked down to see a red-haired body on his own. He followed the hair till he saw Mito's sleeping face on his shoulder. He blinked before remembering the strange warmth cover his body when the nightmares came back. He smiled gently before kissing her forehead. He gently started to shake her. When he stopped to see if it worked to wake her, he only got a My ramen, he smirked. She definitely got Kasan's love for ramen, even dreaming about it. So when he shaked her again, he expected her to say something about ramen again. Imagine his surprise and shock when she said something totally different. Naruto-kun, let me sleep a little longer, she mumbled. This made Naruto do a take back. Naruto-kun? When did he become that? What happened to Naruto and I? Or Nisan? Before he had time to contemplate this, he felt something over his face, so when he opened his eyes from thinking, his eyes snapped wide open, seeing Mito's face an inch from his own. He only had a second to mutter gasp before Mito's lips locked with his own. He stayed rooted to the spot for what felt like an eternity, which really was seconds, before he, gently hiding his panic, lifted Mito's body and set her down in bed. After this, he quickly got up, grabbed a scroll with the kanji for clothes, before going to the shower. He never saw the slight openings of Mito's eyes or the massive blush on her face as she remembered what she had just done. Sweet Kami, I just kissed Naruto-kun, she mentally screamed, waking up her tenant, which was gonna make it worse for the poor redhead. Oh, what's this? Did you just say you kissed Naruto-kun? Kyubi said with amusement in her tone. This made Mito freeze mental before blushing like crazy as Kyubi showed the memory of what she had just done over and over and over again. Kyubi just loved torturing her container. When Naruto had gotten out of the shower, he had picked up his scroll and poofed out a new set of clothes. So when he walked back out with only his pants on, he blinked in surprise to see Mito already woke up and was staring at him, with wide eyes and a big blush on her face. Naruto blinked before remembering the current attire he was wearing, or the lack of, before he blushed as well before quickly putting on a black muscle shirt. After this, he just grinned, breaking the embarrassing situation they were just in. Good morning, Mito-chan, he said. It seemed to work, since Mito's blush lessened and smiled back at him. Gee, good morning, Naruto-kun, she mumbled before realizing what she just said. Then the blush brightened. Naruto heard the kun part and decided to accept it for now. If Mito wanted to say it that way from now on, she could. I mean, it's not like it would change their relationship forever, right? He then went to his personal belongings and started unsealing the rest of his clothes. As he did so, he looked over his shoulder and saw Mito get up and get ready as well. As he looked at her, the more he kept seeing his Kasen in her. She just kept growing up to be like a clone of her, and sometimes it hurt, since he never got to say goodbye. He shook his head out of his musings. At least he had Mito, the one person he'd protect with all his strength. With that he grabbed his trench coat and pulled it over him. After this he latched Zangetsu onto his back, fully wrapped in its casings. He looked, then sat down and waited on Mito to get done. After a few minutes he opened his eyes after mentally planning on their next move. When he looked around he saw Mito already dressed, but attaching her kunai and shuriken pouches. He stood up, surprising Mito. He then walked to the door. As he spoke, "Mito-chan, are you ready?" he said, looking over his shoulder. He got a nod from the strangely quiet girl. This made him raise an eyebrow, since Mito was usually hyperactive, and wondered if she was alright. He continued on though, but still wondered if she would be okay, although he never knew the thoughts running through her mind at the moment. Since when did I start calling him Naruto-kun? Or the fact I blush even more when I'm just around him. Ugh, hi, I'm only 10 years old and already having these kind of thoughts, and about my own brother. Though that last part didn't really matter to her, strangely for some reason. Haishur Gates. At the gates you could see 5 figures standing at the marvelous entrance to Haishur. Gathered around them was the populace of the city. For one of the figures was none other than their leader Iroh Mizaki with a scroll in hand. The other figures could be seen as Naruto dressed in his usual attire with Zangetsu strapped to his back, Mito dressed in blue shinobi pants with blue shinobi sandals. Along with this she wore a sleeveless red t-shirt that had the Uzumaki symbol stitched on the back. She also had her mother's trademark katana strapped to her hip, but she hadn't yet figured out a name for it, since seeing as she heard her brother mumble the name called Zangetsu when he gazed at his own weapon, she figured she would give her sword a name as well. Next was Hitomi, dressed up in all-around black clothes as well as a cloak to shield her identity later on in her trip. Beside her was her Kasan Mikoto Uchiha. She had come to see off Hitomi along with Naruto and Mito, and to wish them all a safe journey. Aizo cleared his throat before speaking. "Naruto-san, as I said, I would have the message of your arrival sent to the Kage of Kumo, and he has promised to send a group of his best shinobi to accompany you back to their village. This scroll here is your proof that you are who you say you are," he said, handing the scroll to Naruto. Naruto spoke. "Thank you, Daimyo-sama. We really appreciate all that you have done for all of us," he said, gesturing to Hitomi, Mito and Mikoto. Aizo just waved off his compliment before getting a serious look in his eyes. "Also, I will be heading to Konoha today at a later time, so there won't be no need to worry about them for now on," Aizo said, gaining looks of gratitude from them all. Naruto smiled before speaking. "Thank you, and I do hope we see each other again, Iroh-sama," he said in a formal manner. "To yourself as well, Naruto-dano, and you to Mito-dano," he said, getting a small blush of embarrassment from Mito since she wasn't used to this kind of thing and hid behind Naruto's leg. Naruto smiled at this before nodding at Aizo before turning to Mikoto. He smiled before he was on the receiving end of a bone-crushing hug and would downright admit even though he could feel her pillows smushed against his chest. Mikoto would have surely snapped his spine in half if Zangetsu wasn't in the way. Though he swore he could hear a sound that sounded like a pained groan from inside his head, he shook his head before returning it. Mito got one as well. Poor little girl didn't have the same protection. After this he surprisingly got a peck on the cheek from Mikoto before she whispered a few words into his ear. "Be safe, Naruto-kun, and protect that little angel of sister of yours," she said before backing away. Though they never saw the jealous glint that appeared in Mito's eyes, Naruto just gave a cheeky smile before rubbing his head in a oh-so-familiar manner from a certain redhead. He turned to the last person and his eyes softened before placing a hand on Hitomi's shoulder and giving it a reassuring squeeze. Since he had seen the emotions running through her eyes, he knew she was very hesitant to leave him and go into the world alone. "Remember, Hitomi-chan, you have that way to reach me, so when you're in danger, use it. Don't fret about what I'm doing, use it when you're in a death-like situation and need the help, alright?" he said, gaining a small nod from the woman before she too pecked him on the other cheek before she kneeled down to Mito's level. "Mito, do me a favor, protect this lump when he gets in over his head, because sometimes he always does, and although he's very strong, he will need someone there to help him. Can you do that for me?" she said. Mito's eyes lit up and smiled. "Of course I can. Naruto-kun here will always have me to help him when he needs it," she said, pumping her fist into the air, finishing it off with the databao. This struck a chord into Naruto that was no just like his Kasan would do. She always had a phrase when she promised something, and it made his heart warm seeing Mito become more and more like Kushina every day. This made Mikoto's eyes glaze over in remembrance, as well remembering her time with Kushina as they grew up, and smiled softly at the little redhead. Naruto shook his head before ruffling Mito's head, making her face go into the signature pout with the blush as well. Naruto just smirked and waved off before jumping into the forest, followed by a grinning Mito as she too waved to the people behind her. After they had left, Hitomi too had given one last hug to her Kasan, before bowing to the daimyo, then jumping into the forests as well to go on her long journey. After this, Iroh's eyes narrowed, remembering Konoha, and snapped his fingers. Second later, a samurai landed beside him. "Captain, get me 4 battalions of my personal samurai, and 21 battalion of fire monks, and 6 of my elite fire guardians. We will need them," he said with a commanding tone as he strolled back through the separating crowd. The samurai behind his helmet was gaping at what his leader just said and with little hesitance asked, "If I may be so bold, your majesty, but what for? Are we going into battle?" he said, a little wary of the answer. Aizo just kept walking as he spoke to his soldier. In a way, if it comes down to it, then yes, we will. But right now we are all heading to Kanahigakure, and remind them all who is truly the leader of Haino Kuni. He said before looking at his samurai. Now get moving, soldier, and rally the army. He said. This got a quick nod from the man before he disappeared in a burst of speed. Aizo then turned around and kept walking. As he did so, he kept thinking of what he could do. That's when he grinned, remembering a certain country running low on missions, as were a few other countries as well. Haino Kuni border entering Kaminari no Kuni border. They had sped up fast to get to the other border, so this way they could get there as fast as they could. Although Naruto could go much faster, he was keeping his pace down so Mito could follow him. After all, this was her first time out of Konoha or Haino Kuni after all. Right now they were taking a break from jumping through tree, and just started walking to rest for a little bit. As they did so, Naruto could sense Mito's gaze on him again, and sighed while mentally thinking of why she was. Was it because he wasn't carrying her like he used to? Was it because he wasn't playing with her like he usually did? Or, his eyes widened dramatically, did she remember the kiss that happened this morning? He gulped audibly and wondered if she was mad or at the least confused. Because sure as hell he was. Naruto-kun? Mito said. Naruto blinked and looked at Mito. That's when he saw her curious eyes, something that he was nervous about for some reason. He gulped before speaking. Yes, Mito-chan, what is it? He said gently. Mito looked a bit hesitant before looking at the ground as she spoke softly. Well, I was wondering, could you carry me like you used to when I was little? She said cutely. Naruto blinked before chuckling. Seems he was worried about nothing. Sure, Mito-chan, just hang on tight, he said before appearing behind her, shocking her of his speed and grabbing her sides and lifting her till she was on his shoulder with her hands on his head. She blinked as she realized how fast he did that. She secretly wished she was that fast as well, but she shrugged before she circled her arms around his head, laying her head in his soft, and yet somehow mane-like hair. She fingered with a few strands of spiky hair jutting from his head. She always liked how Naruto had spiky hair and made him more defined, in her opinion more unique, as she had to say, though she can't remember the last time she was on his shoulders like this. She mentally thought about it, and remembered it during the time when she was just a toddler. She had just gotten out of her first day in the academy, and when some bullies and their parents came to hurt her, Naruto came upon them seen, and she remembered that day for the rest of her life. He was like a force to be reckoned with, a god that had been angered. She watched strangely when he decimated and beat the parents into a bloody pulp before threatening the kids, before ordering them to drag their sorry excuses for parents away before they die. That's when she had cried in his arms before he soothed her and gave her a ride on his shoulders that day. That was also the day she decided her favorite spot in the world was on his shoulders, watching the sun go down. She shook her head of the thoughts when another thought came to her attention and decided to speak. Ayano Naruto-kun? She said. Naruto, who at the moment was focusing on the road and let Mito play with his hair, hummed a response signaling he was listening to her. Well, I was wondering, well, more like always been curious of something, she said, making Naruto wonder what she was thinking about. Yes, what is it? He said. Well, ever since you went off to fight Ai and came back, I've always been curious about your weapon. It's nothing like anything I've ever seen before or read about in Ka-san's journals about all swords classes. Yours is not classified in any of them, and only comes close to the class category of one of the legendary 7 swordsman's weapons, and it's called the Kubikuribocho, the decapitating carving knife, wielded by Momochi Zabuza. She said. Naruto raised an eyebrow in surprise, one for her being the first besides Yugao that has ever asked about his weapon and was curious as to what it was, and 2 of Mito's information on weaponry with swords. He mentally cried anime tears and praising Mito, saying she is the #1 student any teacher would give their left leg for. He smiled before speaking. Wow, good job Mito-chan, you really did your homework, and yes, you're correct, my weapon is close in category to that weapon, and like his its sentiment, but it's much different than the blade itself. He said, Mito being the curious girl she was. Like what? And what do you mean by sentiment? She said with an adorable thoughtful expression on her face. Naruto just smiled and answered her. Nah, more like the blade has a mind of its own, if you will, and has its very own name. But I'm sure you already know that when you eavesdrop on me. When you think I don't know it, he said with a shit-eating grin. This made her blush, knowing she was caught on that one, so she closed her eyes, sticked out her tongue and bobbed her head a little. If Naruto had seen that, though, he would have swore that was probably the cutest thing he ever saw. Though, my sword's name is Zangetsu, he is my partner in battle, we fight as one, we know each other's abilities and weaknesses, we fight as one and die as one, he said, speaking the words he knew from his years of training with his inner spirit. This made Mito stare at Naruto in awe to think he cared so much for his weapon like that. Yeah, she loved her weapon to death, but the words Naruto spoke, they made her feel a tremor go through her body that held so much power and wisdom that it actually made her feel so small in comparison. She looked at her weapon and tightened her grip on the handle, making a silent promise to be more in touch with her katana than just using it as a weapon. Unknown to the both of them except a certain goddess, Mito's katana glowed a bright red. That's when Naruto's trained senses picked up rustling of leaves and the sound of footsteps hitting treetops. So he unnoticeably shifted until he was in a position to defend himself. So you're Naruto Konoha's ex-Sambusa Teicho, or should I say Shinigami? Said a voice from within the forest. Naruto tensed himself, For some reason, whoever this person was, he was strong, he could feel it. And with Mito with him, he couldn't go all out. He could feel her nervous and shaking body. He knew she was scared after all the training he put her through. This was the first time she was ever in this kind of situation. He relaxed himself as he calmed his breathing. That's when he felt that itch in the back of his mind get stronger, much stronger than it usually was. He grabbed his head in pain as he looked around the area for the enemy. That's when he saw the flash of movement, if only barely, before drawing Zangetsu. Clang! Steel met steel. The sparks flew as the ground cracked under the pressure. Naruto then jumping back from where he was, before looking to make sure Mito was okay. When he saw her quivering, his mind snapped at attention to end this quick. So when he looked back to see his opponent, wasn't he in shock to see a man that wore something striking similar to what he first wore when he became Megami's avatar? He looked at the man's all-around appearance, and sees the clothing more of a opposite to his. It was white on the outside with it black on the inside. He also wore black socks with waraji. He then looks at the man's face only to see a white helmet thing on the left side of his head. It had what looked like a horn and oddly shaped grooves going down the bottom. When he looked at the man's eyes, he saw green eyes with cat-slit pupils. He also saw that his skin was a pale color, deathly pale, but the man didn't look sick at all. Hell, the man didn't show a single emotion on his face. That's when he saw the teal lines descend from his eyes. He also had messy black hair and a thin yet muscular frame. He looked to see the man holding out what looked to be a katana. It was the normal length of any other katana, and it had a green handle and white guard. But he knew never to judge a book by its cover and could actually feel the power coming of both this strange man and his katana. He warily unveiled his zanpakuto. Now he spoke. Now, excuse me, but who are you and what do you want with me? Naruto said with a certain edge at his tone. The man just looked on at him impassively before closing his eyes. Why I'm here isn't important for you, will not survive till today, he said before disappearing with the static left where he stood. Naruto only had a split second to reflexively Shunpa, or Mito would have been slashed by that man's attack. He looked at Mito's now trembling body and knew he had to end this quick. He glared at the man as his eyes took on a bright blue. Zangetsu started to tremble in his hands since he hadn't had a good fight for a long time. He then stretched out his senses and to his relief felt 4 strong chakra signatures coming his way, but they weren't as strong as though. But the last one though had bigger reserves than anyone except for Mito. He cut out of his musings when he had to dodge yet again from the man's attack before putting Zangetsu in front of him, blocking another attacking. But the pressure from the man's swing added with the man's strength alone made a crater where he stood. Naruto trembled, using everything he had to push the man back before he swung at him, which to normal speeds looked like a blur. But to the man it seemed in slow motion, and just bent his back dodging the swing. Naruto was frowning now. He couldn't fight at full strength. If Mito was with him, she would get hurt. He could only pray those chakra signatures were who he thinks they are. He looked at the man as he lowered Zangetsu just a bit, but still at the ready to defend once again. Let me ask this at least, what is your name? Naruto said, still hearing the whimpers coming from Mito's quivering body. The man just closed his eyes once more like he was in thought before speaking. My name, I don't see how it is important to someone who is about to die, but I shall at least give you that much information before I strike you down. My name is Ulquiorra Cipher, and I am the person that will end your existence from this world, he said. Naruto just narrowed his eyes as his Ryatsu started coming off him, forming a protective field around Mito, as well as signaling those shinobi to hurry up. He looked at the newly revealed Ulquiorra and growled, very well, my name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, and I doubt you will kill me, he said, hoping to at least buy some time. Kami's realm. Megami was scowling at the predicament that was happening with her avatar. She honestly didn't expect for them to find him so soon, and right now she knew Naruto wasn't strong enough to handle this person, well, not with Mito with him. For this was a battle between beings not of that realm anymore, and she knew Naruto was holding back much more since Mito was with him. When she looked at Kami, she also saw her frowning at the predicament Naruto was in. She knew who this man was and knew where he came from. The man was one of a few that served under that man, the one who thinks he can cross into gods' and goddesses' territory, the fool. He will get his soon enough. When she shook her head of the thoughts and looked back at the fighting, she could see Naruto reacting as fast as he could, holding back the man. She knew why he was buying time. The Kumo shinobi that was assigned to take them to Kumo would be able to at least take Mito away from harm's way. That's when the true battle would begin. Back with Naruto. Ulquiorra just shook his head before appearing beside Naruto, bringing down his sword. Reacting quickly, Naruto brought Zangetsu up and blocked the strike, and then thrusting his left hand into the man's stomach, releasing a burst of spiritual energy, he called out Heido number 1. Show thrust, he stated, making Ulquiorra fly back a few feet, smashing into a few trees. Naruto then quickly checked on Mito and saw her scared and was in a shocked-induced fear state. He quickly shook her out of her stupor till she looked at Naruto's face. He stated seriously yet softly as to not make her worried. Mito-chan, I sense the Kumo shinobi on their way, and I know I always told you to never use unless absolutely necessary. But I need you to use Kyuubi's chakra and use all your speed to get to their location while I fight this man. Can you do this? He said. Mito was about to answer him until she saw Ulquiorra behind Naruto. She widened her eyes as the man brought his katana down at Naruto's body. She was about to scream for him to get out of the way, until she watched in a flash of steel. Naruto blocked the attack with Zangetsu. He looked back at her only for him to sigh in relief when he sees 4 figures jump from the trees. He quickly acts and grabs Mito and her katana and appears in front of the group, shocking them all. He quickly scans them over and sees the youngest looking from them all being a boy with short, spiky white hair. He was dark-skinned and had dark eyes with lines curving upwards. He wears a dark Kumo ninja attire with an overlong shirt with a hood. He had red bandage arm guards and Kumogakure shin guards. Finishing his attire was a black clothes Kumogakure headband tied around his forehead. The next one was a spiky-haired red-haired woman with her hair going past her shoulders. She too was dark-skinned and had piercing amber eyes. She wore a long short-sleeved dress as her ninja attire. Completing this was Kumogakure flak jacket, 2 simple earrings, boots with white soles, and lastly wears her Kumogakure headband like a bandana. She also carried a long sword strapped to her back. The next one was a tall woman almost as tall as he was. She had short blonde hair with an asymmetrical cut, which was shorter in the back and longer in the front, blue eyes that almost had the same shade as his own. She also had the body that rivaled Tsunade of the Sannin. She wore a very low-cut outfit with mesh armor underneath, a short skirt and red handguards, high boots, and what appears to be a modified Kumogakure flak jacket that covers her stomach only. She also apparently has a sword strapped horizontally to her lower back. The finally person was a woman with long light blonde hair that went down her lower back. She had it tied in a big ponytail as well. She wore a Kumogakure headband tied around her forehead. She also wore the standard Kumo Umbu uniform with the black pants and shirt tight against her body. She also had a kunai punch on her left thigh and wore fingerless purple gloves. When Naruto was quickly done analyzing them, he fished out of the scroll given to him by Aizo and spoke, "Look, I know why you're here, and I can honestly say I'm so relieved you are. Please, I need you to take Mito with you from a far enough distance. This scroll here will identify me and her, the ones you are supposed to meet up with. I don't have time to explain, so just go," he said, although trembling, gently placed Mito in the arms of the long blonde-haired one and handed the scroll to the short blonde-haired one. After this he gave them a glare that would freeze hell itself. "And also protect her with your life," he said before he twirled around, blocking the strike that was about to slice him through the middle. He quickly roundhouse kicked the guy and chased after him, ignoring the desperate and worried cry from Mito. It saddened and broke him that he left her with them, but he trusted the Raikage subordinates to defend her. And he didn't want her seeing him fight like he was about to now. With the Kumo shinobi, they just stood shocked still while Mito was struggling in the hold of the long blonde-haired woman who looked deep in thought at the moment. The dark-skinned boy was nervously looking at where Naruto stood before looking at his shocked teammates, and spoke. Was that, he said. Yes, that was no doubt the very same man that left Konoha and marked as a missing nin in their book, and was also the very same man that is marked as one of the most dangerous shinobi in the world. Now I know why Raikage-sama was so serious about this secure and retrieve mission, said Samui. Karui just kept looking on where the man jumped off into. She didn't even see the man block that strike from the mysterious attacker. But whoever it was to get an Exambuso Teicho worried must be one strong person. If only she knew how right she was. Within Yujito's mind, she was having a mental conversation with her tenant. Nibi, there was something wrong. I sensed a different energy being used around here. Would you know what this is? She asked the oddly silent Nibi. Said Two-Tailed Bijou was replaying what she had just seen and knew directly, since her powers were connected to the goddess of death Megami, that the man they had just seen was someone she had blessed in some way. She just didn't know what. She just answered Yujito's question with a simple answer. Just watch, kitten. If I'm right about my assumption, you're about to see something amazing and completely out of this world, said the Nibi, ending it with her usual purr. This made Yujito blink in surprise. Was that man really that strong? As if reading her thoughts, yes, kitten, he is much more than he appears to be. Hell, the one you're holding is nothing but a child, yet I can smell my big sister Kyubi in her. This got a wide-eyed look from her. She then glanced down to see the still struggling Mito in her arms. She then pat the girl on the head. This made the girl snap her gaze up at her. Please let me go. I need to go help Naruto-kun, she said. Yujito raised an eyebrow at her worried tone and looked at her teammates. What do you guys think? Should we go help him, or stay out of his way, and let him handle it? She said. This got exchanged looks from the others before Samui decided. We can't interfere in a fight like this. For some reason I have a feeling it's gonna go beyond our level, but that doesn't mean we can't go watch and make sure he doesn't need help after the fight is over, she said, with her eyes glancing back at the forest that by now had powerful shockwaves shaking the area. Karui and Oma looked at each other and shrugged before nodding as well. Very well then, let's go and see if the truth of this man's strength is what's said to be true, said Yujito with a little excitement in her voice. Nibi sensed this and giggled perversely. You just want to soak up that hunk of man's body and have fantasies of riding him till you ho dash. Nibi, mentally screamed a blushing Yujito. Nibi just giggled at her container's reaction and knew the now best way to tease her. Then let's go, said Samui. With that, the four, with a worried to death Mito in the arms of Yujito, rushed off to at least try and help Naruto with his current opponent. 10 minutes ago, with Naruto and Ulquiorra, Naruto appeared out of thin air to see the man dusting of his clothes as he stood there like he wasn't even affected from the last hit. Naruto frowned before speaking. I don't know what you have against me, but you have asked for a fight you certainly will not want again, that is if you survive this first encounter, he said before appearing behind the slightly shocked Ulquiorra. That's when Naruto tried to stab him. But Ulquiorra reacted faster, and in turn blocked the blunt with his katana. Naruto then spun the other way and backhanded the man across the face, making him skid a few feet back. While Ulquiorra was apparently trying to regain his bearings, Naruto was conversing with Zangetsu. Zangetsu-san, we need to think up a plan. I know this guy has more power than he truly shows, but then again so do we. But I must conserve and not show my true power yet. Let's see how he fights, play it out a little longer, and if he gets serious so shall we. Till then try and find out how he fights. Till then Naruto, I'm gonna go try and block whatever is trying to get out, said Zangetsu before he faded into the back of his mind. Naruto mentally nodded before looking at Ulquiorra, who just blinked and looked back at him with curious eyes, and in a split second they both disappeared, leaving shockwaves blowing in the area. Each clash of the blades created a crater, each hit left trees crushed or the ground flattened. Each time they collided they made the forests and ground itself uproot. Ulquiorra appeared behind Naruto as they were in the air and aimed his index finger at him and calmly stated, Bala, he stated before a shot of a shaped bullet hurtled toward at Naruto, though he calmly showed the back of his hand and stated Bakuto number 8. Seiki, repulse. That's when an orb the size of Naruto's head grew and blew back the bala at Ulquiorra, though he only swatted the bala away before, appearing above Naruto's sword drawn about to decapitate him. Naruto ducked under the blow and swung Zangetsu upward only for him to miss. He quickly shunpoed before Ulquiorra crushed the ground he was at under his foot. Naruto then quickly leaned his head to the right before a katana appeared a second later. He reacted quickly, grabbing the offending arm, then kicked the now revealed Ulquiorra. This kick made the man crash into a couple of trees as well as create a trench in the ground. Looks like adding physical energy with my attacks does more damage, he said mumbled before he jumped back before Ulquiorra appeared once more. They stared down one another, brandishing their weapons at each other. That's when Ulquiorra closed his eyes once more before speaking. You are most definitely a curious one, he muttered before disappearing faster than before. Naruto widened his eyes. That's when a slash made its way across his chest appeared. Blood spurted out as Ulquiorra appeared behind him, holding his katana with a thin line of blood dripping from the end. He looked over his shoulder and said, Show me why you are called the Reaper, the living god of death, he muttered, before he kicked Naruto in the back, making Naruto fly unnaturally fast, hitting trees before crashing into the ground, making a crater. Ulquiorra appeared above Naruto, and before Naruto could make a comeback, Ulquiorra raised his index finger pointing straight at him and said, Zero, before a green-shaped attack shot out. It went toward Naruto's prone form. Naruto's eyes widened and shunpoed away from the area. Good thing before an atomic explosion erupted from where he last was. Naruto appeared a few yards away with a shredded attire and bleeding profusely from the chest and arm. If I was a second late I would have been killed, and he's moving much faster than before. Add in the fact he using something similar to Shunpa. Makes it all the harder for me. I guess there's no reason to hold back anymore, he mentally thought before jumping away from where he stood. That's when Ulquiorra appeared. I see, you're much faster than you were before. I guess I'll get serious then, Naruto said, and with that he stabbed Zangetsu into the ground and crossed his arms over his chest. That's when a blue spiritual hue of energy started surrounding him. Ulquiorra raised a slightly curious eyebrow. Wonder what he plans to do now, he thought as the wind started circling around Naruto, and the trees started swaying back and forth. And that's when the Kumo Shinobi appeared a short ways from the battlefield. Present with the Kumo Shinobi. Holy shit, did you see that? That Naruto guy and the bucket-wearing dude are fast. And that explosion, I bet even the neighboring countries felt that, said a nervous Oma. Karui just nodded dumbly with a silent agreement appeared in the eyes of Samui and Yujito, as they were mentally shocked at the speed and power that was happening in front of them. They had just gotten there when they were blew back from a shockwave of wind as the two titans clashed. They had gotten themselves situated around a few trees so they could watch without being in Naruto's way or close to being killed, though Mito had watched the battle with awe and shock. Never had she known that Naruto, since he had raised her, showed such power before, and the techniques he used wasn't like ninjutsu, but it was similar in a way. She had watched him fully utilize Zangetsu as him, and the man fought at speeds that weren't meant for humans, and couldn't even comprehend. That's when she saw Naruto's hurt form. She was starting to tear up while watching his blood run down his injured body. That is until she saw his action of stabbing Zangetsu into the ground and placing himself in that stance. That's when she heard Kyuubi's voice. Mito-chan, what you're seeing now is something Naruto has kept from the world for as long as you were born. No one knows of what he really is except me, and I'm taking a wild guess that my little sister Nibi does as well, said Kyuubi. She was watching from outside Mito's the battle that was taking on, and couldn't be more shocked. She knew Naruto was strong and faster than even his father, but at the speeds he was going at now just made all the speed he showed to Mito look slow in comparison. Mito heard what Kyuubi said and was curious of what she meant. Naruto was hiding something. Sure, she always wondered about Naruto and knew he was holding something back, but she didn't know what it exactly was. As if knowing her thoughts, you're about to find out what it exactly was Naruto had been keeping secret from everyone, if only a small bit. But you will see Naruto's true power being used. I don't want you to even blink. I will channel chakra to your eyes so this way you will be able to watch the fight, since I'm sure it's gonna go beyond mortal measures. Kyubi said before a small amount her chakra channeled into Mito's eyes. They changed from the violet orbs to a crimson with a black slit in the middle. The same secretly happened with Yujito, as she too wanted to watch was gonna happen. They all unintentionally got ready, but for what they didn't know, but knew somehow it was gonna be big, very big. With Naruto and Ulquiorra, the spiritual blue energy outlining Naruto's body was getting more wild and chaotic. It had tendrils, for the energy lashing out, smacking the ground, cracking it, or tearing trees. Though no one could still see any difference in his stance, they could see a slight curious expression on Ulquiorra's face. It had been only 3 minutes since Naruto entered the stance, but it felt like an eternity to everyone there. The shaking of the area got worse. Cracks and tremors appeared in the ground, the trees grew uprooted while the energy around Naruto got even worse. Ulquiorra though was taking all this in stride and knew even though he didn't show any kind of emotion, he was a bit curious and a small amount of excitement rushed through his body. Kami's realm. So he's gonna release it? About damn time, that thing has been on him for so long, said Megami. Yeah, but what is it exactly? Only you know what it is since you are the only being connected to his power in this dimension. So do you have idea what he's gonna do? Said Kami as she watched on with an interested face. Megami only grinned, which unnerved Kami a bit before she spoke. Naruto-kun has found something was only limiting his power, which means he found the limiter I put on him so he wouldn't alarm others that are spiritually aware and wouldn't go out to find him, like a certain group we know of. Anyway, he only found a temporary way to release the limiter, but even that is enough to help turn the tides of this battle. Even now with Naruto's current skill he won't match up to that man, so he will need to fight seriously if he's gonna have a chance to beat him, said Megami with a serious look on her face. Kami's eyes widened at this and stared at the scene they were watching with anxiety mixed with anticipation. She spoke while doing this. And you're happy about him temporarily taking it off, why? She said. Megami only grinned much more than before as she stared lovingly at Naruto's form. For this way you, my sister, will see the power he has been holding back. Even when he used Bankai, even then I'll admit it was impressive for my avatar to reach such a stage. The power behind it along with his true abilities and true appearance were locked away into this limiter, she said with a slight regret in the tone. Kami snapped her neck looking at her sister Wei and spoke. What do you mean? All the power he's been using now is only a scratch to what's been sealed. And what do you mean his appearance? Megami, what has the limiter actually sealed away from him? She said, a bit nervous at the end. Megami just gave her a sideway glance before looking back at Naruto's form. That limiter was my strongest one, Kami-chan, but it did something unexpected. It sealed much more than it was supposed to. You see, the power and speed he's been using at this moment was his alone from the physical human body. All the training he's done in speed and my techniques was only part of his power. What you have seen is only a scratch on the surface of what Naruto really is. As for appearance, well, she said this with a grin coming up her face and slight pink blush coming up as well. This made Kami gape in surprise. Naruto was only fighting with human limits. He fought this man at set limits for humans. That's when her eyes grew as wide as they possibly could. If that was true, how powerful was Naruto when he temporarily removed the limiter? That's when she saw the pink blush on Megami's face and remembered it also sealed part of his appearance as well. And from what she knew, Megami never blushed. Well, except when they saw Naruto's first time reaching Bankai. That will be forever ingrained in her mind for the rest of her immortal days. She only had one more question. What will happen when he does release it? Said Kami. Megami just closed her eyes and spoke. When the limiter gets released, Naruto's true abilities come out. His power, speed, hell, even his spiritual energy will dramatically increase dramatically. This though will only be enough to at least bring out a draw between them, she said. Kami only nodded before looking at Naruto's now glowing form in wonder. With Naruto and Ulquiorra. Ulquiorra now stood still waiting for what his opponent was doing. Even now he could feel the rise of his spiritual energy, and his Ryatsu was going up higher as well, though he did feel a bit of fluctuating irregularly. That's when he was shaken out of his thoughts when Naruto uncrossed his arms to unveil his pure concentrated face. Ulquiorra saw the look in his eyes when he did this, and it inwardly surprised him. Naruto's eyes were nothing more than bright blue, nothing more than that you couldn't see a pupil, iris, anything except a bright blue of where his eyes used to be. That's when he knew Naruto was ready to unleash whatever it was, so he got ready, keeping his sword straight and gazing down on his opponent. Naruto was gritting his teeth while focusing as hard as he could. That's when he felt it. He shot his arms out to his sides and yelled, "Limiter Kai!" He yelled before he erupted in a flash of light. This temporarily blinded Ulquiorra as well as the audience. But that didn't mess with their hearing, so when they heard an explosion of gigantic proportions erupt from where Naruto stood, it shook them to the core. Hell, every village from Lightning Country to Hino Kuni could see the bright light. The sky itself was lit up by the explosion. The clouds parted or disappeared from the bright light, though someone could hear the distant voice of a girl. Mito, before the explosion, saw the light erupt from Naruto, and yelled as it took him in, "Naruto-kun," she said before the light blinded them all. When the light started dissipating, Ulquiorra was the first one to see what happened afterwards. He was in front of a giant crater beneath his feet. When he raised his head to look for Naruto, he sees smoke covering where he stood, although he could see it already clearing up. So when everyone was able to get their sight back, weren't they all in shock when the smoke fully cleared, showing a different Naruto? The figure showed the same height. Naruto was just a few inches taller, making him 5 feet 9 inches. He wore the Shinigami attire except a few key pieces for one instead of socks or waraji for footwear were black umbu boots. Upper torso was also showed his muscular chest and six-pack. He had mesh over this finishing. The customized design was a black hyouri with tears end at the bottom. Across his chest was a red rosary strap. He also changed physically. His hair had grown noticeably longer and less spiky, more of a tamed. The spikes fell down with it almost covering his eyes. It also reached past his neckline and to the shoulder blades. His eyes changed from the vibrant sapphire they were to an icy blue that showed a maelstrom of power within that no one could control. His facial features were more defined, with his face more angular, an eye more narrow like that of his father. His arms, now visible, showed rock-hard muscles that were covered from his former attire. Lastly, in his right hand was Zangetsu, glowing bright blue. Ulquiorra's eyes were now wide in shock. Now his suspicions were confirmed. This man was a Shinigami. Second later, he had blocked a strike from Naruto, pushing him a few feet. That's when he saw the ferocity in his eyes, knowing the man was gonna try and end it quickly. He pushed back and they separated. Naruto then quickly threw Zangetsu up before grabbing the end of the bandage, and with the shock of Ulquiorra was actually spinning the weapon at fast speeds. If that wasn't enough, Naruto was much faster than he was before. So with he used Sonito and Naruto using Shuinpa, that's when the battle began. Clang! Steel met steel once more. Naruto appeared above Ulquiorra and swung Zangetsu, almost slicing the man's right arm off. If it wasn't for the man blocking the attack with his own katana, they disappeared once more before Ulquiorra appeared in the air above the now appearing Naruto and said "Zero" before the green blast of spiritual energy blasted headed its way to Naruto. Naruto turned in time and raised his right arm and stated Heido number 33 Sokatsui, blue fire, crash down, he said, blasting a blue spiritual energy attack counteracting the Zero. This resulted in a massive explosion in the air, making the two opponents fly back a bit. With that, Naruto appeared out of the smoke. He spinned around, blocking a slash at his back, before gathered his spiritual energy into Zangetsu and pushing harder. This resulted in a visible blue blade-like attack coming off Zangetsu, heading for him. Ulquiorra though cut down the attack only for him to be get grabbed by the head and slammed into the ground, making a crater. Naruto inwardly didn't use such vicious tactics, but had to beat this person quickly. That's when he was punched in the stomach before backhanded away from where he stood. When he tried to stand up, he was slammed back down from Ulquiorra's foot. When he looked up, his eyes widened. Ulquiorra didn't have a scratch on him. He quickly shunpoed before where he laid was Ulquiorra's foot and a small crater. When he appeared a few yards away from Ulquiorra, he got instanced and disappeared, then reappeared in front of Ulquiorra. Then his swung downward, which Ulquiorra blocked once again. Naruto then pulled back spin Zangetsu again before letting it go at fast speeds at Ulquiorra, where if the pale man didn't dodge it, he would have been stabbed through the chest. After this, Ulquiorra appeared in front of Naruto and tried to swing his sword down, only for his wrist to be stopped by Naruto's hand, and having Naruto's other hand placed in front of his face, he then stated, "Eat this, Heido number 63. Raikoho, Thunder Roar Seer," Naruto said. That's when yellow electrical and spiritual energy gathered at the base of Naruto's palm and released it into Ulquiorra's face. With the Kyumo Shinobi, "Sweet Kami, this is unreal," said Karui. As her eyes were wide glued on the fight before them, she had long since given up trying to catch up when they vanished and appeared somewhere else in the area. She only keeps her attention on when they're visible. Even then she sees them do things that are either strange to her or downright impossible. I mean, when do you see someone be that fast? Or not die from the hits either we're getting? Omoi just sucked on his sucker nervously. If they keep fighting like this, then they'll get attention from neighboring villages, and that will lead to the daimyo knowing. Then he'll spread the news to the other daimyos, then he said, but was cut off when Karui punched him in the head. "Baka. Don't over-exaggerate everything," she said. Samui though was keeping her sharp, keen blue eyes on the battle before her. She knew the man they were told to meet up with was strong, hell stronger than a Kage, but what she was seeing now blew that out of proportions. Even an army of Kages wouldn't match up to this. The speed used surpassed the rumors she heard about the legendary Hiraishin no Jutsu. The strength surpassed of Tsunade of the Senin's own, and the techniques looked to be stronger than any ninjutsu used before, even if they were strange. Yujito and Mito with both their tenants were completely shocked. The speed, power, and abilities both used were otherworldly. It was never recorded in history that someone had used those kind of abilities. But the change to Naruto was a big shock to Mito. She always remembered her brother's appearance through and through. But now he looked different. He looked almost like their Tusan. But Naruto was different. He wasn't the fun-loving, joking brother she knew. He was now a deadly warrior using tactics that would kill a normal human in a second. A shinobi though would survive some hits, but even the toughest of them all wouldn't last that long in this kind of fight. You got that right. What you're seeing now is a fight that surpasses mortal understanding. Yes, some humans might survive some hits, but that's to an extent. Mito-chan, what you're seeing now is another side of Naruto. Something you weren't meant to see yet. This is the side of him when he's deadly serious about something," Kyubi said. Mito kept her eyes fully on Naruto and remembered her words, and could see it was true. Naruto was very different than before. He was always looking for a vital area to attack and end his opponent, and if the pale man hadn't blocked the attack, she was sure the man would have died long ago. She only hoped that Naruto made it out okay. Kami's realm. In the realm of Kami, the two goddesses couldn't take their eyes off the fight even if the two were moving slow in their eyes. It was an interesting battle, Megami's avatar against a being as Ulquiorra. It showed the full development of Naruto's abilities and skill with using Megami's very own power, though Kami and Megami blushed a real dark shade of red when they saw his transformation. And mentally agreed on one thing. Naruto had a body built for a god the way he was going now. Megami spoke while watching her avatar. That's what happens when he releases the limiter, if only for a little bit. His true capabilities with being my avatar comes out. This is basically the true Naruto Kami-chan. Everything that was part Shinigami was sealed except for the minor things. The power behind most of his attacks before were locked away, she said, pulling. Kami just looked at her before looking at Naruto. She honestly would express Naruto interested her badly. I see. By curiosity though, has he ever released Bankai in this state? She said. Megami just looked at her with cold eyes, which unnerved her a bit. No, and if he does, let's hope it doesn't come to that, she said in a tone of finality and sadness. Kami just blinked before looking back at the fight, slightly praying she could meet Naruto herself one day. Back with Naruto and Ulquiorra. This resulted in blowing the man back into the demolished forests. Naruto breathed out a sigh and placing Zangetsu on his shoulders, holding the handle with his right hand. Well, I think that did it, he said. With that he turned around and began to walk away. Where do you think you're going? Said a voice. Naruto looked back only to get blasted by a supercharged Zero blasting him into the forests before it resulted in a nuclear explosion. This rocked and shook the whole area and pretty sure half a 5-mile radius. Mito's eyes widened in shock when this happened, but before she could say anything, "Don't worry Mito-chan, I can sense Naruto-kun is okay, no need to worry." This made her slightly relaxed, but couldn't help but be worried for Naruto. Back in the destroyed crater, Ulquiorra appeared atop it, looking down in the smoking middle. There lay Naruto's struggling form. Naruto had at the last second shielded himself by surrounding himself in a shell of condensed spiritual energy. But even then he had numerous injuries. 2 broken ribs, he could feel that, a nasty burn on his back, 3 bloody gashes among his chest from when he landed. And lastly his face had blood dripping down from his head and over his face. Naruto struggled himself, before he heard Ulquiorra speak. I see, this is your limit. I expected more from you, but I guess my expectations for you were too high. But know this, when you die so too will your sibling. After that was said, Naruto's mind snapped at attention and stood up, ignoring the pain in his body. He glared into the green-slitted eyes of his opponent Dan. "Do you fucking dare touch her?" Naruto said. Ulquiorra only shook his head before speaking. "You are in no position to tell me what to do. Now lie down and die, like the filthy human you are," he said in a monotone voice. With that Ulquiorra turned away and was walking away. Naruto glared at the ground, thinking on what he could do, before he remembered the one thing he could do. That's a last resort, but what other choice do I have? But can I even achieve it with the limiter off? Though I don't have a choice in the matter. Zangetsu, you ready, partner? He mentally thought. Always Naruto. But be ready, the thing within your mind I've been trying to hold back may find this as a chance to come out when you use this form. So please do your best to end this quickly, Zangetsu said through Naruto's inner world. Naruto nodded faintly before he slowly stood up, before releasing a burst of his Ryatsu. This got the reaction, for Ulquiorra turned around with a curious expression on his face. Well, it would seem you have a bit more fight left in you, then let us see what you can do, foolish Shinigami, he said at the end. Naruto just looked down at the ground, his hair shadowing his eyes. He raised his right hand holding Zangetsu and swung it to his forefront and placed his left hand onto his right forearm. This action made Ulquiorra a bit more curious as to what the man was gonna do. That's when blue spiritual energy started coming off Naruto. The flowing end of Naruto's Zangetsu started to swirl around his right arm, before it completely wrapped around his arm and the ground around him cracked. When Naruto raised his head up, Ulquiorra saw his eyes changed. They showed a glowing blue in the center, with it also outlining his pupil. Naruto spoke. Now I see. You weren't going all out on me. I see now you're no human. I can tell that much through this whole fight. Those kind of attacks would kill a person. But you don't have a scratch on you. And whether or not you have super hard skin or something, I don't care. What I do care about is you trying to hurt Mito-chan, and that's something I won't allow, he said with a scowl form on his face. Ulquiorra raised an eyebrow and spoke. You speak as if you have a way to stop. But from what I can see, you're buying time. What is it that you have up your sleeve? He said. Naruto just glared at the expressionless man and said, I have one way to take you down, or at least a way to make you retreat. It's something I haven't used in a fight before, only practice, plus I never used this form with my limiter off. But you never know until you try. Naruto said. And what would that be? Whatever is you have though won't save you. I've been toying with you all this time, even with your so-called limiter. What is it that could make you even think is strong enough even beat me? He said with a little curiosity in his tone. Naruto just grinned weakly as blood came down his head. This is what I meant, Ben, he said as the wind around them completely stopped and the anticipation of the hidden crowd held in their breath. Kai! He yelled at the end. Zangetsu then glowed blue, hiding the blade itself. Blue lightning crackled around the growing spiritual blade. It finally erupted with a blue beam of energy shot off like a beam toward Ulquiorra. The man himself only had a little time to dodge the attack, but did get a little cut on his left arm. His eyes widened when he felt a little blood go down his left arm, gripping to the ground. He actually broke through my? This is surprising. And did he say Bankai? This fight might have gotten a bit more challenging, Ulquiorra said, looking at his bleeding arm. When he looked at the site of what the spiritual blade attack did, he saw a catastrophic sight. A trench about 5 foot deep and 3 feet in width went on where trees used to be. It stretched on for miles and was pretty sure it would scar the land itself. When he looked back, a blue explosion of spiritual energy erupted like a volcano, and it reached far into the sky. The sight could even be seen from the oncoming Raikage and his brother Killer Bee. The light lit up the sky, illuminating it for miles upon miles. The Kumo shinobi had to hold on to where they stood, for the shockwave almost blew them away. They had watched 1 minute Naruto was getting beat, then saying a word, then this. Though within Yujito and Nito, Nibi and Kyubi were in stunned silence, and were having thoughts upon what Naruto's few words were before the explosion. The one thought came together in both their minds, and the shock on their faces appeared. Did he say Bankai? They thought similar regardless of the different mind they were in. When the light faded, all that there was in its place was smoke, but you could tell a figure stood within from its shadowy outline.